This is like a vacation day. This is just, everything feels like kind of a punt because it's not reality today. And then I started watching the game. And I thought, I kind of understand why. I'm not even indicting them for it. But the Pacers over in Paris have had a number of team activities and dinners, and as they should. I mean, you're going to be over there like they have, and I think there's a great bonding experience as a team that goes with it. But the reason that we had this like feeling, or I had this feeling of like this free half vacation day, was because the Pacers were over in Paris, and that booted us off the air. And then I realized I think the Pacers also got swept up in the vacation day and the fractured schedule and everything else, and they themselves fell victim to, wait a minute, there's a game to be played. Everything that went into the fact that there was a game seemingly superseded the fact, guess what, there's still a game to be played. Like in my case, it was everything that went on. I'm like, this is great. It's like a vacation. But it seems the Pacers felt that way too. And then the game was played, and they were still like doing all of the sightseeing. That was a clinic by San Antonio, and I think part of it, and again, I'm not indicting the Pacers for it, and there's still a chance for them to, get back to 50-50 when they play San Antonio before they come back from Paris. They still have one more game over there. But I also wondered, and I know this is probably way overthinking it, especially in a 30-point blowout where Tyrese Haliburton, if you believe those sorts of numbers, was minus 20 during the time he was on the floor. Good game from Mathurin, but Haliburton maybe wasn't as aggressive as we like to see. We talk about that. But I wondered how much of it, Jimmy, was this. Because of the fact, and I totally understand it, maybe the Pacers' focus was compromised by being in Paris and everything that goes into that. Obi Toppin getting engaged, having dinner at a nice French restaurant, wearing the best French clothing, whatever it might be. And I'm not even indicting them for it, so long as they remember there was a game to be played. And in that game, they looked flat. But could part of that be because they were caught up in the distraction of it all? And who, Jimmy, is San Antonio's best player?
Victor Wembanyama.
And who had an unbelievable game yesterday statistically?
Victor Wembanyama.
And who is the guy for San Antonio that seemingly being in Paris would be the least novelty for?
Wemby himself, Victor Wembanyama.
So was it a trap game that we didn't think about because of the fact that going over there, Victor Wembanyama didn't have to do all of the side excursions because he's been in France his entire life? I don't know if he's like native to Paris, but I mean, obviously that culture and everything that goes with it, if you were to go to New York City, you would do a lot more sightseeing than somebody who is native to Yonkers, right? And sure. I wonder if part of that didn't factor into it.
I mean,
either way, though, bad performance.
I mean, yeah, it's possible, but like the Spurs, we know everything, and continued prayers out there for, what's happening with Greg Popovich and him not being with the team right now. But from like a leadership standpoint, it's not like that the rest of the Spurs players had this like hard-nosed brass approach to it. And I bring that up because Harrison Barnes had a great game. Devin Vassell had a great game. Like they had players through this roster that had great games that aren't named Victor Wembanyama, that had to deal with the same stuff the Pacers did. There was just as much from NBA social media about, like they do for every playoff game, but especially like they do for a game of significance like that, of what's everybody wearing and what's the pregame fit. Like everybody dealt with that. So for me, like I think it's a valid point, Jake, but it's not, and I'm not saying you're framing it like this, but why that doesn't concern me is I don't give it as a pass for the Pacers because everybody not named Victor Wembanyama had to deal with that same, Fair. Oh, this is all cool, this is insane. Like we're over here getting to see the Eiffel Tower or the Arc de Triomphe. This is awesome. Everybody had those same hurdles except Wemby, who's probably used to it. I just felt like that third quarter, maybe not as quite as high as 45, but that type of third quarter the last 2 seasons has been what's plagued this team. Sometimes they've been able to overcome it and put together a little bit of a rally and make it interesting late. Other times, you get a 30-point blowout like that. We could go through an entire weeks worth of shows from a year ago of, man, what happened to the Pacers in that third quarter, and giving up a 45 spot on basically a road environment is tough to overcome. Now, you highlight it. They're going to have another opportunity on Saturday to get things through, but I felt like, even though I did pick the Pacers to win yesterday, I picked Victor Wembanyama to have a great game for that purpose that you outlined, of him being comfortable, of him being used to that environment, of no distractions being involved for him, and he largely got whatever he wanted, whether it was defensively. He blocked Myles, like I said he'd probably get an opportunity to yesterday. He was everywhere on the floor, whether it was in the paint, whether it was beyond the arc, whether it was dishing. He was awesome, and the Pacers could never really overcome that. So disappointing, but I think everybody not named Wemby had the same level of potential to get sucked into, this is a new, strange, out-of-routine thing, and for some reason it really only affected the Pacers.
The arena was too dark.
Think so?
Yeah. It kind of felt like a bubble game.
Yeah.
The arena was too dark.
It's that lighting that they use with the Lakers.
Correct.
And the Brooklyn Nets.
The old Mackey Arena used to be the same way. Brooklyn, for sure, is like
Brooklyn.
that. The old Hinkle is like that. Now, Jimmy, one of your skills, by the way, good afternoon to you on a Friday. Happy Friday to you. Weekend is upon us. The sun is out, and somebody has posted already 20 times on social media that we are apparently through the 10 darkest or shortest days of the year or whatever it might be. So
yes.
we're starting to see the cracks at the light at the end of the tunnel, right? I've always said February is easier than January, because when it's
Less
terrible
days.
in February, you're like, yeah, I mean, but we're close to March, right? And
Yeah.
shorter month.
Yeah.
January is just like, oh my gosh, it's January 60th today. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But nonetheless, one of the things, Jimmy, on the course of this show that I've learned about you is your pride and the ease of which you can pronounce one of the trickier last names in the NBA, which is that of Giannis, right? Most
Yes.
people just call him Giannis or the Greek Freak, because I personally say it as Antetokounmpo,
Yep.
but you have a different way and it rolls off very easily. Go ahead.
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Okay, now, with that said, I was listening to Mark Boyle yesterday along with Eddie Gill, and there is a player for San Antonio that is more intimidating when you look at it. Mark did a good job pronouncing the last name. Not a new player per se, but I need you to look at the box score if you could, and then read off for me the last name of Sandro, number 54.
So I might need Eddie to bail me out here, because this is one that trips me up as well, but I believe it's Mamu Kalashvili.
I believe that's correct.
You get those two right, but you can't get Devin last name
Yeah,
correct.
I know. Give me that one. I knew I butchered it.
Vassell.
Vassell. I knew I did it wrong. It's the longer ones I'm confident with. It's the shorter ones where I
Sandro
kind of fail.
Mamakelashvili, right?
Yes.
Yep.
When you break it down, it's really not very hard.
No.
Mamakelashvili. It's not very hard. But
we've been trying to do that with you with Anarumo for the last week and a half. Granted, you've turned a corner.
I got to write that down. It's Anarumo, right?
Yes.
Now, it is funny because a lot of names trip me up.
Mm-hmm.
But one sport that has a lot of names that are challenging is auto racing.
Sure.
And when I do racing, there are times where, like Juvan Sundaramurti is closing in on Santiago Urrutia, and it's not hard for me at all. Go figure.
So
Yet Anarumo, I'm like, I have to write it down. Is it Anarumo or Anarumo?
Lou Anarumo.
Anarumo.
Yeah.
Anarumo, yeah.
So wait, so all we need to do to fix this, whether it's Osterman, whether it's Topirak, whether it's Anarumo, is have Eddie borrow the sound the Pacers use, and just play that, and you'll be good. That's it?
Here's how I'm going to remember Lou Anarumo.
We just recreate the fake 500 broadcast you did.
Well,
with
good
us three.
callback. Good
That's
callback.
right. Here is the way I'm going to remember Lou Anarumo, the new defensive coordinator.
Okay.
So imagine somebody from Canada has a wife named Anne who's feeling ill in a hotel, and they need to get her a place to sleep. You would say, get Anne a room. Oh.
Nice.
As opposed to A. Close, though, right?
That'll work, eh?
That's the sound of me trying to say Lou Anarumo, right?
Yeah.
Either way, your thoughts yesterday on the game between the Pacers and Spurs, Jim?
Yeah, I was disappointed in that third quarter. They had so many instances a year ago where stuff like this would happen. I didn't feel like out of the gate they were overwhelmed by the moment. I mean, you're down 2 at half. You're kind of answering counterpunch for counterpunch. I actually thought Obi Toppin was really solid in stretches for them, especially when they started to get into lulls offensively. But then there's moments where, look, I love Thomas Bryant. I've made it pretty clear on this that I think it was a genius acquisition for them, given how salary cap strong they were, and they needed to find depth in their front court, and they go and get him, and he's been superb for them. Too often with that second unit, he's matched up against Wemby, and it's like, okay, just put the bucket on the board and give it to the Pacers to go on the other end offensively. Like there were too many miscues. And also, Jake, there were opportunities, or rather a lack thereof, for the Pacers to get the proper stops on Wembanyama. Like, I can't remember if it was Quinn Buckner or Jeremiah Johnson of FanDuel Sports Network who highlighted it yesterday during the broadcast, but like, there were passes that were inaccurate, but Wemby's so long that it just hits him right in stride. He's able to just reach out and snatch it and then go right up with it. Like, I felt like it was a buzzsaw performance from Wembanyama that by the time they got to the third quarter, the Pacers just were overwhelmed and didn't have anything left. I didn't leave it with disappointment as much as I just left being a little bit frustrated. But they have another opportunity on Saturday. I didn't feel like they were that far off through 3 quarters of ball. Like you go through 3 total quarters of ball, I should say. First, second quarter, down 2. In that fourth quarter, I know a lot of that's garbage time, but like that, it's a much closer metric of what the Pacers are. You cannot afford against any team in this league, unless you're going to be the high-octane, no doubt about it, Pacers offense from a year ago, which they're not quite there yet. They've showed more of it in 2025 than in 2024 in this season. But unless you're going to be that high-octane offense, you cannot have a quarter where you're giving up 45 points, even in today's league, and expect to have a chance to win. So they clean that up. They get more efficient in that regard. I think it's going to be a much tighter, closer game on Saturday. I mean, did you view it the same way that, and Eddie, give him credit, highlighted this yesterday, with Wembanyama, how the season's gone on, one night he'll have a game like this, the next night he'll be
Correct.
like 5 for 20 and he'll struggle. Maybe they got that out of the way, but did you feel like it was almost that open gym, this is my country, this is where I'm going to make a mark type of game for
a little
Wembanyama?
bit, yeah. I mean, he certainly his presence was a huge factor in that game. I think, again, we go back to part of what really held back the Pacers yesterday, and I know that this is broken record. Matter of fact, can you play that fish sound again, Eddie? If you could, this is the fellow. Yeah. See, this is awful. And this guy, what's he doing there? He's like blowing into a vacuum cleaner, right? Is that what he's doing? Do we know that?
There was a pet stain on the stage. They had to clean it up with a Bissell.
That's what the guy from Fish is doing?
Yeah.
But when you listen to that, it is pleasuring from an audio standpoint is hearing a broken record. So when I repeat myself a lot and sound like a broken record, that should actually be our official warning of what's coming. It is a broken record probably to say this, but in the games where Tyrese Haliburton is not necessarily – and, yeah, he had 7 assists yesterday, okay, and he did not turn the ball over. It's not like he was terrible. But seemingly – and I think that, again, I go back to – I think Haliburton at times becomes too aggressive in terms of distribution of the basketball and thinks that and has the mindset that will allow then for him to become more aggressive in terms of shooting.
Passive?
And, well, in other words, he is aggressive in getting others involved and, yes, passive, exactly, in getting himself involved. And it needs to be the other way around. It is the games where he comes out and is aggressive in terms of his scoring that sets the tone more so and opens things up for everybody else, because then they come out on him, especially if he hits a few early threes. And I think he needs to do a more consistent job of establishing that early. You know, doing the step back, establishing that, and drawing a defense out, and then he can really start to get everybody else involved, and everything then clicks off that. They run, and their cylinders all start firing at the same time when he goes that way with it. And I thought yesterday he was a little passive.
I mean, I think that's fair, and I think that you've still had a couple of games like that from him with all that he's gone through in terms of just a health standpoint the last, 13, 14 months, as Eddie's highlighted there. I just think for me, this was always a risk with the international game. Like, I don't think that you're fully far off, Jake, with your initial point of maybe they were distracted. Maybe anytime you change routine, any athlete will tell you this, doesn't matter if it's football, basketball, baseball, you name it. Anytime you drastically change the routine of the season, there's always a risk that things get out of sorts. But the reason that I tend to push back about that is it wasn't present when they went to the locker room at halftime. Like, you look at how they played that first half. Yes, I know they were down, but it's a one-possession basketball game. It felt like all the fun allure, as you mentioned, of an afternoon March Madness game, and you look at it and say, okay, Pacers are going to have a golden opportunity here in the second half to regather themselves, and they never were able to do that. They never set a tone. Life was not difficult for the majority of that game for Victor Wembanyama, and I know he's a unicorn, but like, you need to be able to, whether you're Myles Turner, whether you're Pascal Siakam, whether you're sending extra coverage his way, you need to be able to make it so that he is not just getting effectively isolation attempts or trailing threes or triples from the logo at will, to the point that you're so overwhelmed with everything else that you start to fall apart like you did in the third quarter.
By the way, do unicorns fly, or is that just Pegasus?
I think that's just Pegasus.
Unicorns obviously have the
They've
one
got the
horn,
horn.
right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the unicorn. But do they fly?
I don't think flight is in their pattern.
Are you sure?
Fairly confident.
Those
There might be
Do
a
not
subsection, but they don't fly.
They
as a
don't fly?
standard unicorn.
Do not
Yeah.
fly.
Well, then why does everybody talk about unicorns as being extra special? I'd rather have a Pegasus. Aren't Pegasus fly, right? Don't they have wings?
Pegasus has wings. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, why does everybody talk about, if you have something that's like super unique and special and shiny and impossible to figure out how to, take control, they're like, well, it's a unicorn. Well, I'd much rather have, if you were given, when you're a little kid, if you had your choice, unicorn or Pegasus, you'd go with the Pegasus, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, because I want flight for sure.
Right.
But I get the concept.
So why don't we
of
say, from now on, should we just say that Wembanyama is a Pegasus?
Well, I
That
think
seems to be the much more skilled horse. A unicorn doesn't have any skill. It just has a horn. Okay, great, whatever.
I think
right?
it's the purity of the.
It's like a rhino.
I think it's the purity of the unicorn itself.
Well, what's pure about it? Just it's got a horn?
I mean,
The other one's got wings for
I
crying
don't
out
know. I mean,
loud.
it's a pure white horse. I don't know what you want from me.
Unicorns, aren't there like rainbow unicorns? And like, they got My Little Pony. Doesn't it have like all kinds of unicorns of different colors? Like
Yes, you are correct on that.
Yeah.
There are winged unicorns in fiction lore, but generally a standard
Well, that
unicorn
would then
is
that's a here's the thing: is it a winged
Yeah.
unicorn or a horned Pegasus?
It's a great question.
Which is it? Which is the dominant animal? I think it's the Pegasus.
We
that's
could
the
get
dominant.
somebody on here that's fantasy etymology to take us through
Eddie?
that. I don't have it on top.
What?
Anything you'd like to opine?
I think
Your
Myles
entire
Turner.
life appears to be a fantasy.
There's also, per the World Wide Web, magical abilities for the unicorn that the
Really?
that the Pegasus
Okay,
does
now
not
we're
have.
getting somewhere. What abilities does the unicorn?
I thought that'd be enough to stave you off. I
Shot
need to click
blocking
the
from
link
12
now.
feet
Yeah.
away? Is that one of the skills?
Vertical leap, actually.
Ability to
Believe it or not.
shoot threes at 7'3"?
Yeah, we're gonna get.
Wait a minute, but hold on. You said there are magical, unique abilities about the unicorn. The Pegasus can fly, for crying out loud. What more do you need
now,
than that?
Now we're getting into like Superman versus Batman type stuff. Like, I don't know what you want from me
Aquaman's
here.
the most underrated.
Yeah, talk to fish. Get out of here.
Aquaman's
Cool,
great.
man.
Aquaman is
Good
a
for
fan
you.
of fish, though, for what it's worth. NFL playoffs are upon us. We'll talk about that as well today. We got a big show lined up. Isiah Thomas is going to join us, the former Indiana great, sometime in the 1 o'clock hour, I think just about 40 minutes from now. Want to get his thoughts not only on the Pacers, but just his thoughts on Indiana as well. Obviously, as the greatest player to have played at Indiana University and played a year as a teammate of Mike Woodson's. Indiana in action this weekend, taking on Maryland. That is on Sunday. Big one tonight for the Boilers, taking on Michigan. Dusty May is doing a heck of a job with Michigan, and then obviously we know Purdue trying to bounce back.
It's a massive game. I mean, when you look at
It
the
is.
implications of the top of the Big Ten Conference, and we ask potential question marks about Purdue after the loss to Ohio State, great opportunity for a bounce back for the Boilers and to give themselves really solid footing around there with Michigan State, Maryland, and others at the top of the conference.
Who would you say are the top two teams in the Big Ten?
Probably Michigan State and Purdue.
Okay, so which is the Pegasus and which is the Unicorn?
I would say that I think they're both Pegasus because they continue to do it. Unicorn has to be rare. Like, for example, Dusty May winning the Big Ten in his
hold on.
first year.
A unicorn
would
has
a
to be
unicorn.
rare. You're telling me a Pegasus isn't rare? If
They're
you went out
both
right
mythical
now,
creatures.
if you went out right now,
I would lose
let me
my
ask you
mind
this.
either way.
Let me ask you this:
All
if
right.
you went out on Monument Circle,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
would more turn your head? A horse, an IMPD horse walking by that's got a horn in its nose, or one of them flying past 20 feet off the ground?
Neither, because I'd be too stunned they finally finished the steps on the monument. That would shock me more than both of those things.
The one that's flying is the only one that actually can work its way around the
Correct.
circle, right? Because he's not walking. Like what magical powers can a unicorn have that trump the magic powers of the Pegasus?
What if it could teleport?
Now you're onto something. Like hyperspace on asteroids?
Yeah, I have no idea. I'm just throwing it out there as a potential power.
I mean, I'll grant you that. The teleport would, I mean, that's pretty hard to argue with. That's pretty tough to contend with for sure, right? Eddie, you were staring at the floor.
Yep.
Any reason you were staring at the floor?
Nope. Not at all.
Do you want to teleport coming up in just a couple of minutes? Because I mentioned the NFL playoffs. I mean, we've got Washington.
Man.
We've got Philadelphia. We've got Buffalo. Who doesn't want to go to Buffalo this time of year?
It's great, I hear.
We got Kansas City. Are you going to the game?
I am.
You are going to the game?
We are going to the game, yeah.
Did you get tickets?
I did.
Secondary market?
I did.
Over, under 300?
Over.
Well over.
Okay, Eddie, come on.
Over, under 600?
Right around there.
What kind of money bags your wife doing? What is she doing?
No kidding.
I can't disclose.
Just you and the wife? You and the brother?
No,
Who's
no.
going?
So me, my brother Rich, my nephew Tony, and my nephew Al.
Rich. You notice the key word there.
No brother Bob?
Bob can't make it. Shout out to brother Bob. He had knee surgery a couple of months ago.
Well, you're not walking.
Bob's in his 60s. Like it's tough, man. A lot of walking around. Tailgate with the Cooks is serious business.
So okay. So wait a minute.
Shout
so
out to
you
brother
are
Bob.
you are
I wish he was
leaving
coming.
when? Tomorrow
morning. Yeah.
And you're staying in Kansas City or Lenexa or
We're staying in Prairie View,
Summit?
Kansas.
so you're going on the other side,
Correct.
staying in
Yeah.
Kansas,
Yep.
okay?
Yep.
And then Sunday the game is at what time?
5:30 local, 6:30 here.
And then you're staying in,
We're gonna stay the night one more night and then drive back Monday morning.
and it's what, 7.5 hours, 8?
Yeah, right around there.
And now when you get over there, so you'll get over there what time tomorrow?
If we're planning on leaving around like 10:30, so we should get in about 5 or 6 p.m.
So do you go to like little Chiefs parties? What do you do?
I have a reservation for us at Q39, which is a nice barbecue joint in Kansas City.
He's a joint.
I'm adapting to the locals, man. What do you want me to do?
I caught the Q part. Eddie catches the joint. Go figure, right?
Naturally.
Kansas
Yeah.
City is a cool town, though. You ever been to Lawrence?
I've not, no.
You're only going to be 35 minutes from Lawrence. You're basically, if you're not familiar with Kansas City, take Indianapolis, okay?
Yeah.
So Indianapolis, you have Indianapolis and then the northern suburbs of, like this. I hate to say it, but, well, obviously in Center Grove and that area south now in Indianapolis is really nice. But you have the open land space is to the north side, right, in terms of the growth of the urban sprawl. So take Indianapolis and just turn it sideways. In Kansas City, the west side, which you're getting in, so in Kansas City, State Line Road would be the equivalent in Indianapolis of like Dean Road or Keystone. And, it goes right through like the residential suburban areas of Kansas City. When you get into Kansas and the western side, you're in the newer suburbs with the open space. So if, for example, you're staying in what part?
Prairie View, Kansas. Is where
So
we're
that's
at.
basically probably near Lenexa or one of the Overland Park.
It's like 25 minutes south of Arrowhead.
Okay,
which is
south.
Right,
okay, so you would be the equivalent of if you were to put it in the Indianapolis language, if you were staying in Noblesville, Lawrence is Anderson.
Okay, sure.
That's the best way to say it. But at any rate, we don't even have to have a Pegasus to get there. We don't need your 7.5-hour drive. You said your brother is staying back here because he's got the lame knee, right?
Just had knee surgery.
Well,
Shout out to Brother
Lame
Bob.
knee.
We can
Come
take him
on.
to Kansas
Come on.
City.
Come on, don't do that.
We
Brother
can take
Bob.
him to Kansas City right now, though, because did you bring along
A pizza
Pretz-
Pringles today.
Pizza Pringles?
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah.
Put your tray in an upright position, though, because we're going to board it on the other side and fly her out on the 2-minute drill next. Did you go to the top of the Eiffel Tower in Kings Island?
I did.
Did you go to the top of the Eiffel Tower in Paris?
I did.
Do you think they're in any way, shape, or form the same? When I was a kid, I thought the Eiffel Tower in Kings Island was really big.
You know how when you buy like a box of Cheez-Its and it shows enlarged for texture? I think that's basically what happens there with the
Don't forget
real
about
Eiffel
Vegas.
Tower.
There's the
Oh,
Eiffel Tower in
there is
Vegas.
point, Eddie.
Nice. Now, can you go to the top of that one, though?
I think you can,
I've stayed at the Paris in Vegas.
as have I.
And
Also, Eiffel Tower and Epcot, guys. Can't get up to the top of that one, but they're all over the place.
Wait, there's an Eiffel Tower in Epcot?
There is?
I've only been to Disney World before Epcot. They were building Epcot, but I
Yeah.
was 6.
Oh, yeah.
I've not been to Disney World's Epcot like world travel thing
Good time.
at all. So here's the thing: since I've not done that, you have, and we talked about all these different places. We're supposed to talk to, and hopefully in a little bit here, Isiah Thomas. He won a national championship for Indiana in Philadelphia. No Eiffel Tower there, Liberty Bell, but it is one of the stops here along our travels. You don't even have to go to Epcot to travel around this quickly. It is, we call it the 2-minute drill.
Spanning the globe.
It's the 2-minute drill.
We'll lead it off in Kansas City. Josh Briscoe, Chiefs on SI. All right, Josh, this is the 4th matchup between these two teams in this era in the playoffs. Is this more about what Kansas City can do offensively to try to keep up with Buffalo, or more about trying to limit Josh Allen and not let Buffalo get into high-octane range?
And believe it or not, more confident in the Chiefs' defense right now. I think they've earned a lot of that throughout the season. Now they're also much healthier than they were for this first matchup between these two teams earlier this year. I really expected a little bit more out of the Chiefs' offense in the divisional round against the Texans. Only Xavier Worthy caught a pass from the Chiefs' wide receiver room. No completions to Hollywood Brown or DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, and the rest. So I think the Chiefs' offense has a little more to prove in this game. I think they're in a better position. I think some of that weird stuff against the Houston Texans was a matchup choice that the Chiefs were making to go heavily to Travis Kelce. But the Chiefs are not going to win this game with 23 points, I don't believe.
Josh, you walk into my next question. Travis Kelce, 7 catches, 117 yards, and a touchdown against Houston. Does it take another turn back the clock performance from him, or do they get enough balance from those weapons like Brown and Hopkins to put up points?
So back to Houston, they have 2 excellent corners on the outside, right? I think what Buffalo has done over the years of this rivalry really hitting full speed is largely to key in on Travis Kelce. And I have never really subscribed to the idea that, like, Matt Milano was the world's one and only Travis Kelce stopper. The matchups are all very different, but I think that Buffalo is going to key in on Kelce more. So I would guess, now please don't follow me on any betting apps on this one, because this one could bite you in almost every playoff game. I would guess that Travis Kelce has less statistical production in this game than he did in the divisional round, but I think that's going to open things up for the wide receivers.
Josh Briscoe, Chiefs on SI out in Kansas City. Appreciate it. Go get some good barbecue.
I always do, and hopefully I'll talk to you guys again in a couple of weeks.
In Buffalo, Joe DiBiase, WGR in Buffalo. All right, let's get the Bills side of it. Is this more about slowing down Patrick Mahomes or more about getting Josh Allen rolling?
I think it's more about limiting Patrick Mahomes. The Bills have had a horrible history against Mahomes in the playoffs, but if you look at those 3 games, 2 of them were against a Tyreek Hill Chiefs offense that was vastly different than the Chiefs offense that we see today. And last year, while you might have thought, okay, that's a vulnerable Chiefs offense, you could get them. The Bills came into that game with their 4th and 5th string linebackers. They had a bunch of injuries all around the defense. They just were not prepared with the right health to win that game and to keep them in check. So I think Allen shows up for these games against the Chiefs every time. I would trust him to do it. It's more to me about, can the Bills finally limit Mahomes in any way in a playoff game?
Is defensively their scheme let anybody but Travis Kelce beat us, or do you think there's more that they need to focus on than just that?
It's a good question. The regular season meeting this year, Kelce had 8 yards. He was hardly involved in the game plan at all, and part of the reason was the Bills could not cover Xavier Worthy in the first half of that game. Funny, the guy they traded the pick for in the draft, let Kansas City draft him, couldn't stop in the first half. They did make some adjustments, limited him better in the second half. So in this game, I think you're going to get a heavy dose of both of them. I can't imagine Kelce in a playoff game not being involved to some extent, certainly not the 8 yards we saw in November, but Worthy is the one that I'm really interested in. Can he get one big play on this Bills defense, because he's been pretty involved in their offense recently?
Joe DiBiase, WGR in Buffalo. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Dave Zangaro, NBC Sports Philadelphia, City of Brotherly Love. All right, Dave, last time these two teams played, Eagles and Commanders, just about a month ago, Washington wins, but Jalen Hurts hurt for most of that game. Anything we can take away from that, or is that quarterback issue the one that was the difference in that game?
It really mattered in that one, but, I mean, Jaden Daniels had a heck of a fourth quarter in that one, too. He had 3 touchdown passes in the fourth. It was a game where the Eagles thought they had it won. They got an interception, and then there was a Devontae Smith dropped, and they ended up getting the ball back, drove down the field, and won the game. So they know Jaden Daniels is a dangerous quarterback. That offense is dangerous. I think the biggest takeaway was that game was really chippy, and that sets up for an exciting rematch on Sunday.
Saquon Barkley's been dynamic, obviously, over 2,000 yards. Can he be, though, if they get a lead and want to keep the ball away from Daniels, a between the tackles, salt clock every down back?
Yeah, he's done that. I mean, he can be any kind of back they need him to be. He's that good. He's the best running back in football right now. They have a good offensive line in front of him. Even with an injury to the center, Cam Jurgens, they should still be really good. So, yeah, we've seen that from them before. I mean, he's more than home runs. He's a meat and potatoes kind of back, too, when they need him to be.
Dave, Jaden Daniels presents such a unique matchup from a defensive standpoint. Do the Eagles adjust to him, or do they stick true to their game plan and hope for the best?
No, I mean, I think that's the one thing about Vic Fangio is that's made him so successful. If he's willing to change, he's willing to adapt to his players and also to their opponent. He'll do whatever he thinks they need to do to win. In this game, I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. They've had kind of 2 different ways to attack Jaden Daniels. They blitzed him a heck of a lot in one game, and then they didn't in another. I think they're going to try to confuse him with their coverage looks, but ultimately it's going to come down to players making plays.
Geno's or Pat's, better cheesesteak?
I don't get involved in the cheesesteak wars in this city. I play politics on that one.
All right, appreciate it. Dave Zangaro, NBC Sports Philadelphia. Much appreciated.
All right, take care, guys.
Washington, D.C., Ben Standig for The Athletic covers the Commanders. All right, Ben, let's get to this. Jaden Daniels, have we finally reached the point where the moment's going to be too big for him, or is this guy simply cool as a cucumber?
Yeah, I think he's simply cool as a cucumber. When he got here, back in the spring and summer, and that was his reputation, poise, all that. Okay, cool. But then we started asking questions like, when's the last time you felt like rattled in a game? And he said, well, it was probably when I was playing like pee-wee football when I was like 6 years old and my dad was the coach, and I was kind of having a temper tantrum. And you're like, okay, funny, good story. I've seen nothing to suggest that that's an incorrect statement. He has never been. He never gets rattled. He never seems to be indifferent. It seems to change his mood or whatever. And I mean, it's not just the winning. Like even when they're losing, whatever it is, you wouldn't know any difference. The lineup kept using over and over again. No matter what happens, he acts like he's the guy third in line at Chipotle waiting to order a burrito. Like there's no pulse, there's no nothing, and you see in the fourth quarter that steadiness, that consistency, has him playing winning football.
Ben, let's shift over to his right-hand man, in-star wideout Terry McLaurin. How big has he been to Washington, both on and off the field?
Yeah, tremendous. As luck would have it, I had a story up on Thursday about Terry, the player, but also more about the man and how he kind of views his role in the world as helping to help whether it's teammates or people in the community, giving them an ear and advice as needed and so on. And he has been tremendous for this team. This has been obviously a miserable franchise for several years. He got here in 2019. This is the first winning season that he's had, and he has been a rock this whole time. And now with Jaden Daniels, he's already been a really good, productive player, but it's now gone next level. And to have a guy like that, not a diva wide receiver, somebody who's in partnership with the quarterback, and a guy who in the locker room is just highly, highly respected. Yeah, it's a huge, huge deal. He's been effectively the face of the franchise for several years with good reason, and now that continues. And the partnership with him and Jaden Daniels should be pretty spectacular here going forward.
In the District of Columbia and covering the Commanders for The Athletic, Ben Standig. Ben, appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Thanks so much.
Jimmy, not going to lie to you, I was really tempted to Ben to just say, thank you for calling in from our nation's capital, like Forrest Gump, and then I thought I'm the only person that would have gotten my reference to the bad Forrest Gump impersonation.
That's most of the show anyway, so I think you would have been fine.
Probably a good thing that I did not do my Forrest Gump impersonation. But that is the 2-minute drill on this Friday, and as we'd mentioned earlier, Isiah Thomas, great player at Indiana, obviously an NBA coach, and going to join us, I think, here coming up in the 1 o'clock hour. So we still have that to look forward to. Kevin Bowen at 2 as well on a Friday edition, Query & Company on the Fan. Thanks to all who participated in the 2-minute drill. We bring it back now to Central Indiana and a report, interesting one that Eddie came across talking about Myles Turner. Jimmy, you had mentioned that, or I think Eddie, you might have been the one that mentioned that you thought yesterday Turner might have been a little bit taking the bait of trying to score against Wembanyama. Maybe that held back Indiana just a little bit, but there's no doubt his value to the Pacers. But now there are some reports that the value from a monetary standpoint may price him out of the market for Indiana, but we'll get into that in a second. Tell me what it is that you had just recently found on the old interwebs there, Eddie.
Now, Jake Fisher's reporting that rival executives in the NBA don't expect Indiana to pay the salary Myles Turner is seeking. That reported number is $30 million per year.
Now, the question is, and I'm going to go back to my Ricky Henderson rookie card analogy. When I was a kid, I collected baseball cards, loved doing it. And my dad once asked me, "Do you have some good cards?" And I said, "Oh yeah, Dad, I just made a trade the other day at a baseball card show, and I got a Ricky Henderson rookie." My dad said, "Oh, okay." And that was that a valuable card? I said, "Dad, it's worth $200, which is a third of what Jimmy would be willing to pay for a Buffalo Bills victory to see it live."
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And my dad said, "Really?" And he said, "Well, that's a lot of money." This was back in like 1983. And he said, "Have you found anybody to pay that yet?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, it's only worth what somebody's willing to pay you." No, Dad, the book says it's worth $200. My dad said, "Okay." And when someone pays you $200 for it, that's what it's worth. And Myles Turner seeking $30 million, he's a very good player, don't get me wrong. And there probably is a franchise that will pay him $30 million. But he's not worth that until there is somebody that agrees to it. If Indiana, from a salary cap standpoint, is not capable or able to offer $30 million to Myles Turner, that's one thing. Question becomes, is there another franchise that is going to take him away because they have that kind of money? I would have to look. Give me a player that you, Jimmy Cook, in this current era, in 2025, I don't mean historically, like right now, give me a player in the NBA that you would consider to be of the same category as Myles Turner in terms of just overall production, value, tenure. So not a guy on a first contract, but a guy that would be like a second contract player that you say he's about what Myles Turner is.
Probably Bam Adebayo.
That's a good one.
Out of Miami.
That's a really good one.
Porzingis.
Okay. Now,
you're right on the tenure part, but I think you'd still weigh. I mean, I don't know who you'd say is the better player, but certainly the healthier, more consistent player has been Myles.
Bam Adebayo is scheduled next year. I'm looking here at his contract to make $51 million. What will Porzingis get, Eddie? Do you happen to have his contract in front of you? Because when you look it up, like you think to yourself, they can't pay $30 million, and then you go, wait a minute, if Bam Adebayo is getting 51,
the issue is
pretty rich, right?
Porzingis is 29.
Okay, $29 million, but of course he's older, right?
The issue is not.
He's 29 years old.
Is he?
I think so. That's the same age as Myles, I think.
Porzingis is only 29.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like he's older than
Myles
that.
turns 29 in March. The issue is not the value of Turner. We need to expand the conversation. It's not paying Myles that money. It is what you're already paying on your books and what percentage of the cap you're devoting to your three best players. And
understood.
I felt this way since they got Siakam.
Yeah.
You cannot contend in the East as it's currently constructed with Myles Turner, Pascal Siakam, and Tyrese Haliburton being your three top players. They're struggling right now to make upgrades financially with how constrained they are. The only way that works is if, and maybe the Pacers feel this way, and I certainly do about Mathurin or Walker make a universal leap underneath their rookie contracts to the point that they are a top 40 player in the NBA. If that happens, then you can get away with it. But that's the gamble you're making if next offseason you say to yourself, Myles, here's 30, you Siakam and Haliburton are our 3 highest paid players. That's not good enough in my mind to win in the East. I love Myles. I'm not discrediting his worth. It's just the reality of the situation the Pacers have built themselves into.
DeAndre Ayton, who's a guy that the Pacers once offered a contract to. Now, I personally think there might have been a little bit of gamesmanship in that, but
that was a fun one.
DeAndre Ayton, $34 million. So market value for Turner would indicate that I think there's going to be somebody that's going to give him $30 million.
For sure.
I think we just answered that question because Jimmy, you are not incorrect in the fact that if he is the third of a big 3, that probably does handcuff you a little bit. But
you're handcuffed right now paying him 19.
There is a team that will give him.
Yes.
He'll be able to find it. That's what I'm
easily. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, most sites that track free agent spending and evaluate things of that nature have him at about a 29 to 30 a year evaluation. I think he'll find that money. I'm saying if you're the Pacers, I get it. It would create a gaping need. And if people want to push back and say, well, how do you fill his absence? Look, I don't know. I don't know how you fill that absence. It's a fair question. But I know what happens if you give him that money. It ties you to that 3 for the next 3 to 4 years, and that's it. That's your core, unless one of your rookie picks ascend to stardom. And maybe Mathurin will. I still believe in him. He could. Walker is still an unfinished, growing product, but if this is the roster they have, if there's no further leaps for Mathurin, and Walker stays maybe a little bit of a bump where he's a nice role player, that's not a team that gets out of the East.
I mean, 36-year-old Brooke Lopez, $25 million at the age of 36. So, my point being, and I'm not saying it to I mean, I think you'll agree with me. I think we're on the same page here. $30 million sounds very aggressive and optimistic for Myles Turner from Turner's standpoint.
I don't think either one of us think it is.
And then you look at what others are making and you go, yeah, okay.
No,
right?
I think he'll get it. I think he's worth that. Again, I want my point clear. Myles Turner's a great player, and the NBA money's stupid. That makes sense. I'm saying the Pacers can't pay it.
By the way, to be contrarian but also explanatory, the guy that cures cancer is worth that. And the guy that, cures incurable disease is worth 30.
Yeah.
No one truly is worth that, but in NBA language, yes.
Correct. Yes.
To be fair, right?
I'm speaking with the Monopoly money. I'm not speaking with the everyman.
When you play Monopoly, which character are you? Which piece are you?
Usually the car.
Okay.
You?
The race car's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm almost entitled to use it. By the way, Isiah Thomas, Indiana legend, next. Isiah Thomas, of course, part of Detroit Rock City and his Hall of Fame career as the face of the Detroit Pistons, and doing so as a graduate or a product of Indiana basketball at the time that he entered, leaving his sophomore year after leading Indiana to the 1981 National Championship. And joining us now on the program on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, he, of course, needs no introduction in the state of Indiana. Isiah, I want to thank you for joining us. Good afternoon to you. I'm going to begin with this. This is kind of a weird thing, but I was thinking about this on the way in. And I'm thinking, okay, if Isiah Thomas is talking basketball in the state of Indiana, does he more so think that he is going to be talking Pacers or IU? Because realistically, you have great contribution to both places. Which one do you think of kind of more often when you think about calling Indiana home?
You know, that's a great question, and hello, and thank you for asking this question. You know, I think you always go back to, you know, when you were like a teenager in your childhood and all that other stuff. And even though I wasn't a child at Indiana University, I was still kind of in my teenage years, and I had a lot of fun at IU. So I always think about IU first, and then the Pacers second. But overall, I think of Indiana basketball. But if I had to rank them, I would say IU 1, Pacers 2.
Okay, which leads to this question, and there's a reason I'm asking what I'm about to ask. When you played at Indiana, and I know you played with Jim Thomas, who I thought was a very underrated player, right? That was Knight's first recruit from Florida. But for the most part, it was a lot of kids from Indiana that you played with. You know, Ted Kitchell, Randy Whitman, Landon Turner, Ray Tolbert. Those guys were Indiana guys, right, that grew up in Indiana. And there was a pride, I think, Isiah, about being from Indiana. Did you kind of absorb that? Could you see that and feel that of representing the state when you were playing for Indiana University?
I felt that from of course, I felt that from the players that I played with, but also from the fans. And, you know, Indiana, when you talk Indiana basketball, it really is a spiritual kind of existence there around the sport. It's a certain way you honor the sport, the way you treat your teammates, the way you pass, the way you cut. There's almost like in golf, like there's a certain honor code that goes along with playing basketball in the state of Indiana. That's not necessarily written, but it's definitely spoken and adhered to.
With that,
if that makes sense.
It does, Isiah. And I grew up here, right? And I remember, the 81 title. I mean, I could sit here.
Right? It's not a thing that's written, but it's a way like everybody expects you to play the right way and with a certain type of heart and commitment.
And I think it was for that reason, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, Isiah. But I think it was for that reason that for so many guys of your era and so many players that were products of playing certainly for Bob Knight's Indiana, that it was very important for them to have a Bob Knight guy or somebody that carried that same core ideology and passion about the game and the style of play for the game, having them with the keys to the program. And I think that's why Mike Woodson, for the alumni base, it was so important when he got that job. Is that a fair statement on my behalf? And how would you assess where the program is under Woodson at this point in relation to that?
I would say that's a fair statement because what we inherited and played under from Coach Knight, when you look at Indiana basketball, Coach Knight is always the standard. Just like at UCLA, John Wooden is the standard. North Carolina, Dean Smith is the standard. And at Duke, you have Coach K as the standard. Those are the only four schools, that you can really say that these four coaches have set the standard in the tradition of play that coaches still have to try to live up to. Bringing back Coach Woodson reset the standards for us. I thought for a long time we had went away from Indiana basketball, IU basketball, and everybody has their own style of play and their own DNA, so to speak. And if you don't really understand the state of Indiana and you don't understand Indiana basketball, it's hard for you to come in as an outsider and live up to that standard. And I think some of the, when we look at North Carolina, we look at, Duke, we look at UCLA, and UCLA has kind of, from the Wooden era of excellence, they've kind of gone away, come back, gone away, come back. But when you look at Duke and Carolina, they pretty much stayed the course in terms of who they are and what they were trying to do. And I would also add Kentucky in there also.
Do you, and I'm assuming, Isiah Thomas, our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, obviously you played with Mike Woodson. You guys were teammates in your first year and his last year in Bloomington, and then he departs for the NBA, and, you guys really took off there and you had a good year in 80 as well. But how often do you talk to Mike Woodson, and how often do you watch and follow what Indiana has done this year?
I talk to Woodson at least once, twice a week, still today, and I follow Indiana religiously, every game.
One of the things, Isiah, that and I wanted you to maybe offer a perspective here, and it's hard for me, admittedly, Isiah, when you do what our side of it, the media side of it, right? You've done that a little bit. I mean, you've held a microphone as well. So when I look at Mike Woodson, and then I think about what it would be like to be from Indianapolis, to have played for an Indianapolis public school, to represent that, and then to go to Bloomington. And, at times when he says things like, I wish I had the answer, like I sense a frustration there because I think in his heart he so badly wants this to go the right way and to work. But obviously there still is a consistency to be found. How challenging is it for him, do you think, because of the pride factor of which you speak? And what things do you think he's still trying to push to get this team to play at the level he wants?
Well, let me answer. It's a two-part question. I'm gonna give you a two-part answer. The first thing that we love about Woodson being there, and also from the state of Indiana, and also the media critique. This is why we wanted someone from Indiana, because when he loses, it affects him personally, it affects his friends, it affects his family, it affects the fans, it affects everyone. He's from the state of Indiana, I think he went to Broad Ripple Public School. So, he can't hide. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't run away to the next state and say, I coached at Indiana, but I grew up in Maryland. It's like, no, your friends, the media, and everyone else is here. And so there's a lot of eyeballs on you. So there's a lot of pressure to succeed. We want that coach to have the pressure to succeed. And we want that from his family. We want that from his friends. And we also want that from the media. Now, I would say this to you, right? The media, we all play our role. And I'm gonna insert Dan Dockage here, because Dan is a good friend of mine, and he also played at IU, and he's been critical of Woody at some point in time, and he's patted him on the back a couple of times too. But at the same time, we want those kids who are playing at Indiana to also understand and feel the pressure of winning. It takes a lot to win, and the critics, I'll say this again, the critics are not always wrong, but there are good lessons and great lessons to be learned out of great and good critique. Now, the media sometimes go overboard into personalities and not necessarily into critique. And that's where we have to, draw the line. But I would just say this, that, I know it was a long-winded answer, but at the same time, that pressure to win is what we want the coach to have and what we want the players to have. Now, the honesty that coach brings to the table, like I sat in a huddle many times with Coach Knight, and there were some times he didn't have the answers either, right? And we as players, we had to try to figure it out on the court. There are some times during the course of the game, during the course of the season, where you as a coaching staff, you as players, you don't have all the answers. So when Coach Woodson gives you an honest answer, and he can honestly say without, without BS in the public or BS in the fans, like he knows it all, he can honestly say, I don't know the answer right now, but I'm going to work my ass off to figure it out. Hey, man, that's all you can ask for from a good coach, in my opinion.
Isiah Thomas is our guest. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Isiah, I've been critical of Coach Woodson over this stretch. It's never been personal for me. As an IU alum and a fan, I respect everything he's done for IU basketball.
Well, let me stop you right there, because I just want you to know I've been critical also, and I want people to understand, like, criticism is not always bad. It's like when I got I remember my teacher telling me when my paper was marked full of red ink and I had a D on the test. I remember her saying specifically, this red ink is to help you, not hurt you. So I don't want people to think like we as athletes, players, coaches, we don't take criticism as bad all the time. Sometimes it's very helpful. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to give you an understanding of where the athlete, coach, and player comes from when he hears the criticism.
No, and I certainly appreciate that. And of course, constructive criticism exists for that reason. But when I look both from my standpoint as a fan and as a radio host, the Archie Miller era was so dark. And those 4 years were so frustrating because you had a belief that you found the next hot hire and he was going to have this ascension like he did at Dayton, and it never came. And fans were sold on the idea, which made sense. I supported at the time, of bring back someone from the Bob Knight era or somebody knows Indiana well. 4 years in, or in this fourth season, it feels like they're just as far away from consistency as they were then. Do you think fans are fair in year 4 in those criticism and those frustrations?
Well, I'm going to 100% disagree with you on where we are in the Woodson era and where we were in the Miller era, and both of them are good coaches, by the way. So in the Woodson era, right, and I'm in the NBA also, so I think Khalil Ware started for the Miami Heat the other night. You got Davis starting in Golden State. We went to the tournament, and I think we lost to Miami, and they turned out to be a pretty decent team. And we're in the Sweet 16 then?
I think it was round of 32, lost to Miami after the Kent State win, I believe, 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yes, to your point.
So, and that was before NIL came really into play. Now you got NIL, and the conference has expanded. So it's a different playing field, and it's a different level of talent, play, and everything else that you're competing for now, because the landscape has dramatically changed overnight. Where we are, I look at where we are at Indiana University, we're work in progress, and that's no different. I think it's going to, and I think fans need to get used to this, especially in the NIL era. it's going to be a work in progress the first half of the season up until January, until, this NIL stuff stops. And why do I say that? Is because every year that coach is going to start out with a different roster, with different players, with different people. He had to learn how to coach. And that takes time. It's not like you get to grow a team together for 2-3 years. You really only get to grow a team together now for maybe 2-3 months, and then you're out and you're playing. And everybody's going to have their ups and downs. So while I say patience, I'm also being realistic in terms of what we can really expect from these players as they're coming together and trying to figure it out, along
Isiah,
with their coach.
One of the things for me, and I want your thought on this or your opinion on this. Like, I think the world of John Calipari. I think that one of the things that he does really well is he gets players. I think he's a very good molder and mesher of personalities. But yet, even with that, there are years at Kentucky where they had these great players, and that particular year it just didn't blend, and you kind of had to go back and reset the next year because of the one and done era too, right? I mean, it's just different. Is part of the NIL era what we're going to see, whether we're talking about Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, whatever it might be? Are you going to have a greater fluctuation from one year to the next because you kind of don't know how guys are going to blend together until you get 15, 20 games into those guys being on the floor? Do we just need to kind of adjust and prepare for this from one year to the next?
Sadly and unfortunately, that's where we are with college sports, and whether that be basketball or football, I think that's what you're going to see now, and that's you have 15 free agents, and at any point in time they can jump up and leave and put their name in the portal. So it's always going to be you're going to be juggling every year, and the good thing for Indiana right now is that you do have someone on the sideline who understands the tradition, who understands the expectations that we all have, that the fans have, and they can communicate that to the kids who are coming there to play at Indiana, putting on the uniform. My fear is when you don't have that person on the sideline who can really communicate and understand tradition, understand expectations, understands that Indiana basketball is different than other places across the country, and this is what we expect here at Indiana. Now, if you don't have a coach like that on your sideline, you can set yourself back in this NIL era. You can set yourself back 10, 15 years.
Isiah Thomas is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. As you're still a fan too, right? I mean, I know that you are a legendary part of Indiana basketball, but at its core, we're all still fans of the game as well. Okay.
I don't know if there's a bigger basketball fan than myself. I don't. Now you may. Well, let me take that back. Because there may be an 11-year-old kid right now who
that's right.
Who's doing all the studies and the stats and so I will give it to them. But anybody who's 20 and over, I guarantee you, I'm a bigger basketball fan than anybody.
Now, I will tell you this. So if 20's the cutoff, I'm in the clear because I actually broke my parents' phone in '88 when Indiana lost in the first round of Richmond, and I was 16. So I still had 4 years of grace period here, right?
Okay, you got it. You got it.
So with that, from a fan perspective, when you look at and you read and you see, and I'm sure you do, as you talked about, the critiques and the support both sides for Mike Woodson, tell me the fan critique or that you find to be incorrect or that you think to yourself, that's coming from a perspective of somebody that doesn't know the inside.
I'm going to straddle the fence here because and the reason why I'm straddling it is because I understand the passion, the emotion of the Indiana fan, which is so great and what we need and what we always want. So I think the critique, I think all of it has been, relatively right down the line. Now there have been some times where, a couple of radio people have gone, a little bit over the line, but for the most part, Indiana basketball and the fans and the pride of Indiana, the emotion that we bring to a game, the spirituality that we have for the sport, that passion can either be 100%, I'm cheering you on, or 100% I hate you. There's no it's like, I hate to give you this example, but this is the best example I can give you is when Coach Knight told my mom and my brother, and when they was asking about, hey, well, the Klan is right there in Indiana, so forth and so on, and they asked, my mother and my brother said, well, who's going to protect Junior if something goes wrong? And Coach Knight responded, well, if we're winning, they will. So that's, I know that
Isiah, in all honesty,
some people may not like that joke, but at the same time, that's Indiana basketball.
but there's still there's still a reality of that, is there not? I mean, honestly, because if you look at, for example, does part of that come into play with, maybe it's a small sector, Isiah, of the fan base, but nonetheless, I think there's a factor of what we're talking about here, the underline of that within a fan base for anywhere, but certainly in the state of Indiana. The factor of, hey, it's year 4 and I'm ready, I'm impatient, right? Would that be the same? Would there be more patience, etc.? Does race come into play? Or is it strictly that? Does it come down to wins? And if Bob Knight said it, doesn't it simply come down to wins?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't simply come down to wins, because you're looking at it like, okay, that 81 championship team that we had, that we won with, we lost 9 games. I'm going to say that again. We lost 9 games.
The Hawaii trip was not necessarily a great one, right?
No. And now then we finally got it together, but there was a lot of ups and downs during the course of that year. And I would say this, Coach K at Duke, I remember vividly his 3rd year there. They were chanting, they wanted to get rid of him. And they were talking about firing him. And then Johnny Dawkins showed up, and things turned around for him. But, that the culture, the tradition of Indiana, you have the right man on the sideline. And believe me, if we didn't have the right man on the sideline, I would honestly say we don't have the right guy. This isn't Indiana basketball. This isn't what we're doing. Now, I can tell you he's trying to implement Indiana basketball. Now, do we have the players right now who understand the spirituality and the commitment of playing and putting on an Indiana uniform? And some of them have it, but we look at some of them and we say, well, this guy ain't caught on to it yet. Hopefully he'll catch on in the next week or two.
Isiah,
but you got the right coach.
Isiah, you bring up NIL, all the complications with it, but the pedigree of a program like Indiana. In today's era, is it unreasonable, with all the resources that Indiana has combating NIL, to expect them to be a tournament team every year?
No, that's not unreasonable. If you got the money and you got the players, then the expectation should be, yeah, we want to make the tournament every year. That's reasonable. That's fair.
Isiah, in talking about Isiah Thomas, our guest, I wanted to ask you real quick.
Now, let me say this. If you miss the tournament and you have a bad season, that don't mean you say, our coach is bad and we're firing the coach. You know,
But if you string together those type of stretches by missing the dance, is that still a fair metric?
Now we got a fair, pool to judge, What's that? You said metric. What's that or term that you use when you assessment pool or whatever?
Yeah, a sample size. You have a big enough sample size.
Sample size.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you have a big enough sample size to really make a accurate, judgment, if you got the money and you got the talent and you're missing a tournament, okay, now we got to talk.
Now, I was not 11, but around that, okay, in 81 when Indiana won the title. And, I can still tell you it was 63-50 over North Carolina. Randy Whitman hit a shot out of the corner in overtime, at halftime to go into the halftime lead. I remember it well, right? So that said, Isiah, I've always wondered this. When you grew up in Indiana in that time, here's what you heard. What you heard was, boy, the Indiana team was really struggling. They weren't finding their way. And Bob Knight just said, to hell with it. And Bob Knight threw his hands in the air and gave the ball to Isiah Thomas and said, all right, you and Landon Turner, and, you guys want to run it your way, you run it your way, and then, boom, everything took off. Now, as I got older, I thought, I wonder if that really happened, or was that part of the coaching strategy of Bob Knight of letting it appear that way and knowing that was the way that you guys had to play in a more open system? What's the reality of what really turned the page for you guys in 81?
Honestly, it's a combination of both. Coach Knight wasn't. He was more ball control, make the defense work, exhaust your opponent emotionally, physically, and mentally. So you use the clock, you pass it around, and eventually a player on the opposing team would make a mistake, and you can take advantage of that mistake. I was of the thought that we could combine the two, that, we could do that when we're playing 5-on-5, but if we get a fast break, Coach, I'm quick enough to get down the court. We got Landon and Ray who can run the lanes, and we can have a little fun out here and not have to make it so difficult every time where you grinding it out, our offense against the opponent's defense. Our advantage, I thought we had, was with speed and also getting out in the open court. We had two trailers who were great shooters, in Whitman and Kitchell. And if Tover, Turner, and I were able to get out in the open court, Tover could use his athleticism, Turner could use his athleticism, I could use my speed and athleticism. Yeah, we may make some turnovers or we may make a mistake here or there, but I think in the long run we'll be okay. Well, we battled back and forth, he and I, on that. And I had to get to a point, and this is where the coaching came in. This is where the good coaching came in. I had to get to a point where I could win his trust by not making a mistake. Key word, not making a mistake. Because if I made mistakes, then he would pull the reins in. So, so what you heard, floating around the basketball culture there in Indiana in terms of people talking about it, it is a combination of all those things. And the fact that you knew it at that young age, and the fact that you and I are talking about it today, this type of oral communication, spirituality around Indiana basketball, where everybody is truly on the same page, the fans, the players, the coaches, everybody kind of knows everything, and there really are no secrets. That's the beautiful thing about IU basketball, in my opinion.
The other thing about that team, Isiah, I've always wanted to ask you is in 1981, everybody vividly recalls not to bring up a bad historical moment, but, President Reagan was shot on the afternoon that you guys were getting set to take on Carolina in D.C. or in Philadelphia, and he was shot in D.C., and there was some question whether or not the game was going to be played and whether they'd postpone it and how they were going to handle it. Now, obviously, we know that how it turned out. But what was the emotional aspect? How much were you guys clued in on what was happening and whether or not you were going to go through with the game? Were you told what was happening? Was there a question? Did you have to, emotionally get amped up and then set back and then get it going again? I mean, take me through kind of that afternoon of that kind of constant change of it all.
Well, this was the beauty of Coach Knight. So we all, I think we were in my room, and at that time, I think it was me, Steve Risley, Randy Whitman, and I think Kitcher was in the room with us also. And we was watching a daytime soap opera. I think it was All My Children.
Okay. That's about as anti-Indiana basketball thought as I can think of, but okay.
Yeah, and so I'll never forget they said we interrupt this program, and Risley was always, he had a great sense of humor. He always was cracking jokes and kept everybody loose, and he goes, "Oh man, the president's been shot." And sure enough, they come on, and they announce, the president's been shot, so forth and so on.
Wow, he said it not knowing?
Yeah, he said it not knowing.
Okay.
He said it just like, as a, oh man, they interrupting the program, right? And so there was dead silence in the room, and we sat there and we watched it. Now, not knowing that there was any talk of the game being canceled, Coach Knight brings everybody together. We talk about, the game. We go over the game plan and everything. And we are prepared to go out and beat Carolina. Coach Knight, his staff, no one, and I don't think any of us as players ever thought in our mind that this game was not going to be played. I know I didn't. And Coach Knight never gave us, the doubt that this game may or may not be played. He kept us locked in and focused, so when we stepped out on the floor, we knew what we had to do to win a basketball game.
Can you also win this argument for me, Isiah? I've told people forever that, and I know that injuries were a factor, the factor. I've told people forever that the reason that the Pacers extended Jonathan Bender is because he was going to be Kevin Durant before Kevin Durant. Had he stayed healthy, he was going to be the first 6'11", 7-foot, on-the-wing shooter that could also put the ball on the floor and get to the basket. And people think that I'm crazy and that I'm drinking some sort of a Kool-Aid. I'm not wrong about this, right?
You are 100% correct, and Kevin Durant will tell you that himself. When I was coaching at Indiana, and I put Jonathan Bender at the point guard position, and I had him bringing the ball up the court and passing, moving, cutting, and I was talking to Donnie about how I thought the game would move towards this. There was a young kid in Washington, D.C., by the name of Kevin Durant, who goes back and tells the story that when he saw Jonathan Bender bringing the ball up the floor and shooting it from the three-point line, he is one of the guys that he imitated and mirrored. Those are facts. And when you look at Kevin Durant today, bringing it up court, shooting it from the three, imagine that's what Jonathan Bender would have been.
Listen, your check's in the mail. I've never felt better
we're gonna
about
have to
myself
hear about
than
that
right
for
then.
the next
right?
year now, Isiah.
Once again, for 5 years, I spoke it into existence, and I was right. Lastly, Isiah, on the way out, I appreciate the time.
You can go back and pull up some old paper clips of and look at some film. I got Jonathan Bender playing the point guard position.
Listen, I saw it like in practice. Yeah, I mean, lastly, I just wanted to end with this. You said you talk to him regularly, and I imagine that there is great pressure and there is chatter. How do you feel Mike Woodson's doing? And I don't mean how he's doing as a coach. I mean, like, as his friend, as his, former teammate, and as a guy that I know wants to see Indiana succeed. How would you say that fans should know Mike Woodson's doing?
As after every loss, as worse as the fans and the media feels, he feels 300 times worse. And I could tell you that there's nobody who takes losing at Indiana harder than Mike Woodson in the state of Indiana. Now, I think he's, how can I say it? I think he's up for the challenge. I do think that some nights he, when we talk, he has been worn down. But the next day he wakes up and he's ready to go. And that's what I love about him. That's what I loved about him, as a teammate. And that's what I love about him as a coach. Like, he's down, but the next day, he's in the office every day. He's in the office 5 a.m., 6 a.m., and he's watching film and he's trying to figure it out. And that's all you can ask for. And Sunday, who they play Maryland Sunday, yep. And I can guarantee you today, in practice, he is as upbeat and trying to get the kids ready because he wants to win and beat Maryland. And that's it. It's day to day, and unfortunately it's for him, it truly is heaven or hell. If he wins, it's heaven. If he loses, it's hell.
And the other thing too, Isiah, let's be real. You win, and then that allows the stability of guys sticking around and not, you know what I mean? Because we talked about the NIL era. I mean, I hate to bring up Purdue, but you look at what Matt Painter's done at Purdue, and winning allows and cultivates for guys to stick around, and then you get the footing, right?
Yeah, you get trust, right? And what they've built, when you talk about Purdue, they've built some trust. And at Indiana, for a lot of years, we had lost trust on the sideline, and we had lost trust from the fan base, and more importantly, you had lost trust with recruits. So what Coach Woodson has been able to do over the last 3 to 4 years is build back and regain the trust of the community. And when we say we've regained the trust of the community, it's okay for the community to question and critique the performance. That's fine. But I think the community still has trust. And if you don't have trust, I'm saying don't lose trust, because you have a trustworthy coach and person on the sideline representing Indiana basketball.
All-American, lottery pick with the Pistons, NBA champion, Hall of Famer Isiah Thomas, and, of course, coach of the Indiana Pacers as well, Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Isiah, I appreciate it. Enjoy the game between Indiana and Maryland coming up this weekend.
Thank you very much, and Hoosiers!
There we go. You were supposed to say Hoosiers. I think there's 3 of them that go into that, right?
Yeah, it is, but sometimes, as Coach and I would say, I want the last shot for myself.
All right, fair enough. We appreciate it, Isiah. Look forward to talking to you again sometime.
All right, thanks. Anytime.
All right, Isiah Thomas joining us on the program. A little bit heavy. Kevin Bowen going to join us about 20 minutes from now. We'll react to the conversation next. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm most thrilled that I'm not wrong about Jonathan Bender.
I will say, I never fought you on that. It made sense, the parallels, but to get anecdotal, like, oh, by the way, Kevin Durant will tell you this, was admittedly
Correct.
pretty cool.
Like right then, do we have the bingo sounder by chance, Eddie? There's your promo, is Isiah Thomas saying, I'm 100% correct about Jonathan Bender. And I certainly understand and respect that from a fan's perspective of Indiana basketball, that they may not feel he's 100% correct about Mike Woodson. He offers a good perspective. I think he makes good points. But you got to win, and you got to win consistently, as he said, right? And I think a big challenge for Indiana as well is the fact that where the winning is taking place is in West Lafayette, and in a system that is very similar to that Isiah played in under Bob Knight, and Mike Woodson played in under Bob Knight.
And on top of that, other programs that you, delusional or not, and I think it's still fair to some extent, but other programs you consider yourself among the elite of college basketball haven't had problems navigating NIL. And if you're going to use that as a device to explain why Indiana struggled, then you have to ask the question, why isn't it happening at other places? I also, and I know we discussed this at length with him, and Eddie's going to get that podcasted up, but like, I think if you asked most fans, the progress itself, like, yes, they did make the tournament. They've made it twice. It could be a 2-year gap if they missed this year, but they did make it twice underneath Woodson to this stage, none underneath Archie. Like, yes, that is a marginal improvement, but metrically speaking, there's not much different to the enjoyment I think fans get of watching IU basketball right now than they did during the Miller era. It's a dentist appointment to watch most nights.
By the way, an open disclaimer, I was not asked by Isiah to mention this, but I did come across the YouTube series. I don't know if you've seen Tony Brown, who also was part of those Indiana teams, is part of a YouTube series which does feature Indiana as part of it, which is Legends of the Hardwood, which is a documentary. It can also be found on YouTube, but it takes a look back at different players from different backgrounds and kind of comments on just like leadership, teamwork, all that goes into making great teams. That does feature some of the Indiana teams that Isiah Thomas was on, and going back and looking at different players. Obviously, Bob Knight's very prevalent in it. But a lot of great video and a lot of great interviews about players of that era and the formation of true teamwork throughout basketball. And again, Tony Brown is part of kind of putting together a lot of these different series as part of a docu-series on YouTube, Legends of the Hardwood, what that's called. Kevin Bowen going to join us, by the way, coming up top of the hour. Colts have a new defensive coordinator. That'll be one of the things we discuss. We'll also start getting into who might actually be playing in the Super Bowl and whether or not Jimmy is going to have to spend more money to watch his Chiefs again.
Yes.
On a 1 to 10 scale, what is your level of confidence that your Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl?
8.
What is the lowest that number has been for an AFC title game in this run?
3.
And that was which one?
The first one against No, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. 3. The first one against New England. Like you didn't know what type of game you're going to get. They still had Bob Sutton, who's one of the, at least in the back half of his career, one of the worst defensive coordinators the Chiefs have ever had. Like they were just a paper bag, and you had that high level offense, but they couldn't get stops. Probably either that one or last year, because there was this whole narrative that it was true. Storyline, Eddie. Sorry, Eddie doesn't like the word narrative. It bothers him. There was this whole storyline about how all Patrick Mahomes' games that he played in the playoffs had been at Arrowhead, and so they'd only played at home, and how was he going to do on the road, and blah, 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 blah. And then they win 2 games on the road against Buffalo and Baltimore. It didn't matter, but maybe a little bit of worry there last year. I don't know. Buffalo's a really good team. I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be a one-possession ball game, but I think Kansas City's defense is better than Buffalo's, and I'm not going to pick against Patrick Mahomes in any setting. So, yeah, I feel confident.
And they'll be facing who?
Philly.
How boring would it be if it's a Chiefs? Eddie, I'll bring you into the conversation. How boring would a Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl be?
Oh, it'd be boring. I'd be, as Jimmy says, laying the points with Kansas City.
It just would be.
Here's the thing: you want.
I kind of feel like it's a Final Four anyway.
You want
other
close
than
to the
Josh
soul.
Allen.
You want close to the soul conversation. We talked about this last year, and you warned me about it. I feel for Detroit greatly. I do. All of us have friends here that are Lions fans. But you brought this up last year, and I thought about it all this postseason. Everybody already hates the Chiefs. I didn't want that one. I didn't want that matchup of Kansas City versus everybody's lovable
Correct.
Lions, and everybody wants them.
You kind of got it right now.
You might with the Commanders.
And here's
like
the
that's
thing. No, I'm talking about with Buffalo.
Yeah. What, 31? Yeah.
And
there.
with Buffalo, the thing that's interesting to me about Buffalo is Buffalo has yet to break through, and yet they're teetering. The question for Buffalo at this point is going to become, does Buffalo, which happens first? Buffalo, the fatigue finally kicks in, or they win it?
Yeah.
Because even because they have knocked on the door now and been relevant, like I think when the Colts finally broke through and won and beat the Bears, by then I think there was already a Colts fatigue nationwide because Manning had been, everywhere.
Yeah.
And they had knocked on the door. The funny thing about the Colts, I think you could. Okay, I've had 2 mountains I've stood on top of and screamed from the mountaintops about, with one each for each of the 2 respective pro franchises in town. One of them is I told people forever that Jonathan Bender, that he was not a bust. Like his knees gave out on him. Had he stayed healthy, his skill set, he was not a guy Jonathan Bender did not flame out in Indianapolis because he never became a great player. And so they gave up on him. He just wasn't healthy. And they eventually had to move on because he had arthritis in his knees, and they actually got a compensation from the NBA. They got an insurance compensation. Then he rehabbed his knees for like a 2 or 3 year period, came back and played like 50 games for the Knicks and was basically just an outside shooter. But so that's one thing, and now we know that I was correct in that, right?
I'm very happy for you, by the way.
Thank you. I mean, we're actually going out for dinner tonight to celebrate.
How long are you going to ride this high horse?
I told you next year, man.
Is it a Pegasus or a unicorn?
It's whatever you want it to be,
I
Jake.
said high horse.
The other thing that I have always said,
Palomino,
and this one I think people actually agree more with me on this. The team that won the Super Bowl for the Indianapolis Colts was not even one of the 2 best teams of the era.
Sure.
For the Colts. The Colts' best team, I felt, the Colts' best team was the one that lost to Pittsburgh. And the Colts' second best team is the one that lost to New Orleans in the Super Bowl. The third best team of the era was the one that won the Super Bowl. But I think those other 2 were better. And So that goes. So by the time they broke through and won it, I think their national brand probably. I don't know this, but I'm guessing that there was a fatigue factor about the Colts that now everybody feels about Kansas City, and is probably close to feeling about Buffalo because the Bills have been here every year. Eventually, they're going to have to kick down the door, and it's going to happen and cost Jimmy a lot of money coming up this weekend.
So beer bet?
No.
All right.
Kevin Bowen joins us next. Do you have big plans for the weekend, Eddie? We know Jimmy's going to Kansas City.
I've got the Pacers and Padre game tomorrow, and then I have a broadcast tomorrow night.
Okay. I'm going to the
Jake, what are you doing this weekend?
it is Metro's day for IU Indy.
Other than celebrating Isiah agreeing with you about not
That's right.
Dragon Bender, Jonathan Bender.
I'm getting T-shirts printed about that. But then they're giving out Metro's T-shirts at the
that's right.
IU Indy game, so it's Retro Metro Day, right? Not giving out T-shirts, they're giving out posters, and then they have T-shirts that are there. And so I'm actually going to the game, and then I was like, "You think does anybody want to go? If you want to go to the IU Indy game, I got an extra ticket if anyone wants to go."
Are you going to wear your Metros gear that you have, the throwback
Yes.
stuff? Nice.
Wait, are they tickets with you? Like, would we be hanging out?
I mean, you theoretically, yes, you would be going to the game with me. You'd be meeting me there.
Would you make Eddie pay to go hang out with you? Is that what's happening here?
Well, believe me, Eddie pays me. Eddie pays me to be able to sit here for 3 hours a day, right?
What?
317-523-9288. That's my cell number. I think most people probably have it by now. But if you want to go tomorrow, 2 o'clock. It's 2 o'clock on the IU Indy campus at the Jungle if you want to go and hang out. No PBRs, but we might have Diet Coke.
That's perfectly sufficient to me.
I'll transfer over 2 tickets and you can meet me there, and we'll go to the game. But I ended up with extra tickets. Like, you know what? Let's go.
That'll be fun.
Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, and yesterday, I'm sure he has now broken down everything that Lou Anarumo had to say, the new defensive coordinator for the Colts. Kevin Bowen joins us. You hear him on the wake-up call with KB and Andy. We're going to get to the D coordinator chat first, but Kevin, for our audience that might not have heard you talking about it in the morning, recap for me your overall experience of going to the national championship game. I know, obviously, the game did not turn out as you wanted, although I thought Notre Dame, you got to give them a lot of credit, because they did not fold tent. But it was cold down there. Overall, how was it?
Well, I thought the cool aspect of it is, like, unlike the Super Bowl, it's a true fan game. It's not a corporate game. I thought, you pretty much kind of split the crowd 50-50. I thought Ohio State probably had a few more fans, but I think that atmosphere is awesome, and I don't think you typically get that in a lot of mega championship type of games. So that was really cool. I thought the stadium was great. That was the first time I'd been there. I'd been to the Georgia Dome a couple times, but not to that Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I thought, viewing experience was good inside. They got a circular jumbotron, which is pretty cool. Somehow Atlanta forgot that they were hosting the national championship, which I thought was a bit of an issue. Very understaffed at bars and restaurants. Literally, we had a waitress say, yeah, my manager forgot about it and just called me in this morning. Okay, that seems to be an issue. Literally multiple places running out of domestic beer. So,
really?
Yeah, I don't know how.
Was Jake there?
The city of I don't know how the city of Atlanta just somehow missed the boat on that. I think a lot of people on social media were certainly griping about the security getting through Hartsfield the next morning. I don't know. Maybe some of that was weather related. It was a long, I had about an hour and 15 wait through security, but luckily I made my flight. So, yeah, I think that probably recaps it all.
The I'm always curious of this, Kevin. You've heard me mention this. When I went to national championship games between Clemson and Alabama, there was a great, even though Alabama, it was like the Alabama Invitational at that point because they'd been there 7 of 8 years or whatever. But both fan bases were respectful of the other because it's like, look, we're the last two standing here. So instead of a lot of trash talk, there was a lot of camaraderie that went into it of kind of mutually enjoying the moment. Did you experience that with Ohio State fans or no?
No, and I would assume Ohio State fans would say the same thing about Notre Dame fans. I mean, it's the two most hated fan bases in college football, so naturally they're probably going to hate each other. The loudest the stadium was all night might have been when they showed Lou Holtz on the Jumbotron, from Notre Dame fans yelling Lou and Ohio State fans yelling boo.
Right.
So, yeah, I didn't necessarily get that. Honestly, my biggest takeaway was just how inept Atlanta was in hosting that. And I get it, they didn't expect that weather. But, it's two northern fan bases that are used to tailgating outside. Throw up some tents and, the Olympic Park. And, it's right in front of the new college – or I shouldn't say new, but the College Football Hall of Fame. And That's probably what stood out to me more than anything.
Yeah,
I mean, Ohio State fans are cocky as hell, and et cetera, et cetera. And Notre Dame fans are equally as cocky as hell. So yeah, two hated fan bases.
Do you think having seen it, because we always talk about it, I'm not going to make us, we all do this anyway, carry water for Indianapolis, but do you think having seen it so well run a couple of years ago helped give you perspective for what it should look like in your assessment of Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, probably. And it's good to point out, obviously, we are heavily biased. But, to me, it just seems like, when you have an event like that, I mean, you're probably having 100,000 people, and virtually all of them are from out of town. So, it's not like a Falcons game or a Hawks game or, even an SEC championship game. You're probably going to get a good amount of driving distance, visitors, I guess. Whereas, for the most part, everyone is literally on a plane to come to your city there. And it's not like Atlanta. This isn't new to Atlanta. I mean, hell, they hosted the Peach Bowl, did they not? I mean, against, Texas and Arizona State a couple weeks earlier. So it was just kind of stunning to me, the lack of preparation on that aspect to it. And even like the section I was in, there was like a merchandise, kiosk that I guess you could call it. And they ran out, or they had about, I should say, probably about 95% of their merchandise was bought with like 20 minutes left until game time. And it's like, man, I mean, that just seems like layup stuff that you would have gobs and gobs of that, in storage just in case, knowing, again, it's, the analogy of a famished fan base in Notre Dame and a starving fan base in Ohio State. So, it almost seemed like the national title, popped up in whatever, like Fort Wayne or Evansville or, insert a random city here that's not used to hosting these events. And yet Atlanta, you would think, would be much, much more equipped, better equipped, I should say, to handle it.
Kev, let's be real. Downtown Atlanta, and now Atlanta is a fabulous metropolitan area, but downtown Atlanta, where I assume is still, it's the same spot where is it still the Georgia? I mean, is this, pardon my ignorance here, is the Mercedes-Benz Stadium or whatever, is that totally new or is that a revamp of the Georgia Dome?
Yeah, totally new.
Okay, but it's the same location essentially, right?
That's a good question.
Because downtown Atlanta, like I've been to Final Fours in downtown Atlanta, and downtown Atlanta is basically Keystone at the Crossing, right? I mean, it's just like offices and hotels. Buckhead and the other stuff is cool, but that's all kind of expansive and further out.
Adjacent to the south of the Georgia Dome is where Mercedes-Benz
and you throw in cold weather and forget about it. You know what I mean? All 27 peach trees were closed. Okay, Kevin, you were breaking down everything that the Colts got out of their new defensive coordinator. Sounds like what we're seeing here is a guy that's going to come in and they're not going to pigeonhole themselves to any one particular style. Question for you is, that is good news for what member of the Colts defense and troubling news for what member of the Colts defense?
Well, I think it's good news for guys like Kenny Moore, is a pretty like-minded player, and Mike Hilton from Cincinnati, that kind of a blitzing nickel, and I think Kenny's been very good at that throughout his career. Anarumo mentioned how when they lost B.J. Hill, a big defensive tackle, that really hurt them a couple of years ago. So you would think, good news for a guy like Grover Stewart. Obviously, DeForest Buckner goes without saying. I'd say the position I'm probably most curious about is just kind of what do they do at the back end of their defense, particularly free safety. Jesse Bates, actually a Fort Wayne guy, he was great for Cincinnati for several seasons with Anarumo, and then he left to go to Atlanta, and that position really dropped off. So Julian Blackman's is a free agent. He was also a free safety, but he's a free agent. So, exactly what does life look like after him? Does Anarumo, he seems to be a guy that has a strong affinity for veteran players. And, if you look at Cincinnati, they really didn't have a lot of young talent be very impactful for them, particularly as of late. So, does that look like, hey, well, we might need to re-sign Julian Blackman? Look at the list of free safeties in free agency. It's not a great list. So I think that's probably the position that I'll be most curious about.
We kind of discussed that yesterday, Kevin. Kevin Bowen, our guest, the fans' very own on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, how Cincinnati gambled on young corners and it failed them. They let veterans walk and it failed them, and it left them with a largely shell of a defense that made it all the way to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. With that thought of knowing that young corners at this stage of the Chris Ballard era are risky, and knowing that getting veteran bodies would help Lou Anarumo achieve what he wants to achieve right out of the gate, does that further emphasize and sway Chris Ballard to change tact and be aggressive in free agency, or do you think that was honestly going to happen either way?
Yeah, I probably think it was going to happen either way. I guess a couple thoughts I have, though. Would they try to do something they did in 2020 and trade, a early teen draft pick for, a very quality veteran player? Obviously, it worked out for DeForest Buckner in that you got a quality player in return. Would this be something you would want to explore? And then the other thing, too, is, I got the feeling from Anarumo, he does not expect this to be a rebuild. He thinks that he didn't say this, but I inferred that, no, their issue is more of a Gus Bradley issue. Now, obviously, we'll see how the personnel plays out here coming up from a free agency standpoint, here in a month and a half or so. But that's kind of the vibe I got of, hey, they got 9 of 11 starters under contract, and we'll see about E.J. Speed and Julian Blackmon, but that will certainly be the ultimate tell sign. But I didn't get the feeling that, he looks at this as when you saw – and they went from a 3-4 to a 4-3, so it's kind of obvious. But you go back to the Chuck Pagano to, I guess that would have been Matt Eberflus and Frank Reich years. They overhauled the defense. It was astonishing, really, how little defensive talent they retained from one regime to the next. I don't foresee it being of that magnitude, but again, if Ballard's going to say, hey, we need tough guys and all this, you got to make some acquisitions, and I don't think relying on your draft picks to instantly instill that, into your system is probably not the way to go.
Kevin, were you really going to run around Monument Circle in a Speedo on Wednesday morning if they'd won?
I was, yeah. So
I don't know that I was going to intervene.
There's almost a tone of sadness. I get why, but
no, I was going to intervene on that. I don't think you would have been able to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of that part of it didn't really hit me. Waking up Wednesday morning, walking out to the car, I was like, holy, yeah. I would have been, genitalia surgery, I think, is a hot button topic these days. I might have had mine just totally off without, any sort of doctor help there.
The kids across the hall would have had a discussion with you about that, by the way.
Well, certainly. Yeah, that could have been quite the experience. So, I took the Speedo back upstairs. I've got a little, desk in my basement that I do some show prep at in the mornings, and that's where the Speedo was sitting. And
hang on, you bought a Speedo, or you already had a Speedo?
No, the lovely folks at Speedo. Thank you to Mark, listener Mark. Boy, he was on top of it. He actually called us on air and reached out and expressed a heavy amount of interest in helping us out. So cannot thank him enough. Sent several colors. We did a poll on our show Twitter page. Overwhelming vote. I believe Mark Dykton, not Mark the Speedo guy, Mark Dykton, labeled the colors, I think, blue bulge, gorgeous green. I'm trying to think what the other color was, but gorgeous green won out. Kind of picture a Notre Dame green jerseys, very Kelly green-like, in case you don't want me to send a photo or anything. But
now that's not Brian Kelly green. That's just Kelly green, right?
No. Just gorgeous green. Yeah, Kelly green on that. So, yeah, sent to me. I tried it on. I would say it was a little tighter than I originally thought. But, yeah, when I went upstairs the other day to kind of put the Speedo away, I was like, do I put it in the actual, do I put it with my bathing suit? Or
save it for a couple months, baby.
Don't you, go turn some laps, start doing – you're up early. Why not, when you get done with the show, go over to Rivy and do some laps?
Sure, yeah. Climb up on the natatorium high dive and see if I can train with some people over there. So
okay.
Yeah, the Speedo's still in my possession, and I'll wear it when Notre Dame wins in Miami next year.
Which would you rather do? The lap that you had talked about in the Speedo on Wednesday when it was that cold, had they won, or going to the natatorium and jumping off the top platform?
Oh, gosh, I'm really afraid of heights. That's a good question. I also was a little bit more – I think I was a little bit more nipple worried than I was downstairs worried.
Mm-hmm.
At least downstairs it was going to have some sort of covering on it. I was a little bit more worried about upstairs. And
you worry more about chapping than chafing.
Yeah.
If we're two guys having a health conversation here, right?
Vaseline, Kev. Vaseline.
Yeah.
don't you have a big health segment? You know, yeah. I mean,
That's right.
I certainly have. Yeah. So
have you
I'm
discovered
just,
yet, Kevin?
following
Have you
money.
reached the age? Maybe not. Have you yet reached the age where you have discovered the miracle that is Gold Bond powder?
I sprinkle a little bit here or there. Yeah.
You dabble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
I dabble.
Yeah.
It's probably not a daily routine, but yeah, it is.
On those
it is something
particularly clammy days, it is a
Sure.
godsend. I will simply say that.
Yeah.
Kevin, does the acquisition of Anarumo change priority of draft or free agency? Not necessarily in that order, but of what they focus on. And by what they focus on, I mean which side of the ball they focus on. Getting him in here, a new voice, maybe he's more aggressive or dominant with what he needs. Does that change in your mind any of the stacking of offensively or defensively what needs to be addressed and in what order?
Yeah, I'll be curious corner and safety. You know, I do think there'll be an uptick in man coverage. I think there'll be an uptick in blitzing. You know, you got to leave probably that back end a little bit more on an island. I don't want to act like they're going to, blitz all night Friday or remember the Titan style, but I do think you will see an uptick there. So those would be the two positions, Jimmy. And, honestly, that kind of falls in line to where I think, this time last year we talked about both those positions as positions that needed upgrades, and I don't think you watched the 2024 Colts and thought, oh, yeah, everything is solved back there.
Does that undercut or replace the need for like tight end, for example, was more or less what I'm going there with. Like the order of it, does it change at all with Anarumo being the guy?
I think it's a fascinating debate, and the debate would be this. If you don't figure out quarterback, you don't stand a chance. I mean, that's probably how people think. I mean, there's a good amount of truth to that. Look at the AFC quarterbacks. So I get that, and it's such a critical juncture for Anthony Richardson. The counter would be, tight ends in round one. It's not like there's been a ton of team success that have come off that. Certainly some individual success. Brock Bowers had it last year, but it seems to be a position where you can find answers elsewhere. And therefore, if you think that, Eddie and I talked about this on the podcast earlier this week that we did. If you made the playoffs this year, you would have been the 7th seed. And look at Denver's potential run, what it would have been. Beating Josh Allen on the road, beating Lamar Jackson on the road, beating beating Patrick Mahomes on the road. I mean, and again, that doesn't even include Burrow or Stroud or, whatever, Herbert or Bo Nix or, whoever else you believe in the AFC. So that would be the other side of it of look at the AFC right now. I mean, it is loaded from a quarterback position, and these quarterbacks aren't even old. I can hear both sides of it. I'd probably still fall on the you give Richardson help, but then I think a branch off of that is Tyler Warren going to be there at 14, and and that's a whole different story. So again, I think it's a really good debate and probably one they're going to have internally here over the next couple of months.
Kev, you think that Anarumo had any sort of conditional conversation about taking this job and what it would mean for him if, for example, Chris Ballard or Shane Steichen was not retained at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, that thought I would think would have to cross your mind. I mean, I think there's some strong Midwest appeal to it. I mean, he was at Purdue for a while.
Yeah, 04 to 11, yep.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say all his kids grew up in that area or maybe even were born there or went to Purdue. Or again, there's just some strong ties. And then, twofold, I don't think he viewed this as much of it as lame duck above him. At least you think it is. We probably should preface by that. The personnel, again, is really there on paper. It's obviously up to him evaluation-wise if he feels like it needs to be tweaked or not. But, again, I don't think he views this, based off what he said yesterday, I don't think he views this as we need 6 new starters or, anything along those lines. Now, again, I think that's a debatable topic. But I think that probably attracted him to being here as well.
Are you going to do a helmet grab for your son to try to predict the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think we got to. I was trying to think if we did one last year. So, let me I got the helmets right here.
Well, he's going to go. Yeah. I mean, the Bills helmet is which Bills variation do you have? The white one with the leaping buffalo?
What do you? Yeah, Bills helmet definitely needs to be picked out. Max refers to them as the buildings. He was watching the game the other day against the Ravens, and he said the buildings against the birds. So yeah, it's got the buffalo on it. What color is the commander? Is that maroon? Do we go with maroon? Is that
I think
what we
that's
got?
maroon. Yeah, but
Yeah.
Are they playing
Eagle,
a third
you
place game now? I didn't know they were doing that. That's pretty cool. I mean,
You got the Eagle, and I'm looking for the Chiefs helmet. Yep, here we are. Yep, all right, I got all 4 out here. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Judging by that, I mean, a W, a K, and a C, I would think he'd be most attracted
He'll go
to the
Eagles,
and the
Bills,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
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 I mean,
sure.
but we
Which
gotta,
is what it's probably going to be.
we got to acknowledge the fact, to Jake's point, like the animal allure for one Max Bowen, I feel like is always the big draw there. Yeah.
But doesn't he like the Chiefs helmet?
It is, Animal Lore. I don't know if we've done Chiefs, right? Have the Colts played the Chiefs in the last 2 years, Jimmy?
It would have been 2022 the last time
here's
they
the
played.
thing, though. When it comes to the
Colts
Chiefs,
actually beat them.
you actually have an animal
Correct.
element, too, because Kansas City actually is the Zebras.
It was the Matt Ryan year.
It was the Matt Ryan year. What did Chris Jones say? Kevin, did you ever figure that out? What did he say? That still bugs me to this day. For those who don't know, Chris Jones gets a unsportsmanlike conduct
he got
penalty.
A big penalty in that game. Yeah.
It extends the drive, and they go in front because of it. Did we ever figure that out?
No, all I remember from that game was Kelsey dropping one in the sun, wide open in the end zone.
I thought it was
for some reason they kicked a million field goals, and Mahomes was pissed at.
Oh, you got mad at the enemy at halftime. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah. He was pissed.
Their OC at the time.
I thought that we heard that it was a slur, a homosexual slur.
I heard that
Really?
rumor,
Yeah.
but I never heard definitively reports what it was. And people asked Ryan after the game, and he said he would
news
repeat
for
it.
you. Of all of the listeners in Marion County, there is one that still cares about that, actually. So,
Right here.
You know what I
Right
mean?
here, sir.
Kansas City Steve maybe as well. All right, Kevin, we'll be looking for perhaps Young Max's predictions, but we'll be listening on Monday when we know what the Super Bowl pairing is going to be. Appreciate the time.
Jimmy, good luck. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks, Kev.
Kevin Bowen joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. I think Chiefs fan Steve's been trying to call in because he wants to basically admit his jealousy to you, I think.
Yeah.
You guys being the 2 Chiefs fans in Indianapolis, and
there's a large Cook contingent as well. Let's be fair to Brother Bob and company. By the way, he's not happy with you. He said because of your Chiefs hate today, he was thinking about coming with you to IU Indy, but now you just missed out on one of the greatest moments of your life, getting to hang out with Brother Bob Cook.
Well, I mean, like I said, if you got a bum knee, if you want to go and hang out with me at the game tomorrow, okay, at the Jungle,
yeah,
get a Metros, Retro, Bob Lovell, Love, all of it, right?
The whole 9.
Simply just let me know if you want to go, and I'm down. I'm telling you, I'm going to be there. Let's go.
It'd be fun.
Send me a text at 523-9288, and we're on our way, right?
Will this be your first appearance in the Casaro era?
Casaro era, yes.
Yeah.
It definitely will
I still
be
need to
that
get down
in the
there.
Casaro era. You have plays of the day also, right?
I have some extended into the weekend for sure.
Okay, well, we'll do that coming up. That's about 20 minutes from now. Jimmy's wildly popular and still available to be sponsored plays of the day. You know, somebody pointed this out the other day, and we've played many of them on this program. There are fabulous theme songs for teams across the league. You have, Fly Eagles Fly, you got Bear Down, you got, the flatulent Bengal, of course we know.
Miami have the Dolphins, the greatest football team.
Correct, which is a ripoff of the Houston Oilers song. I think actually the Dolphins one was first.
I believe so, yeah.
The Colts need that. They tried it forever with that bang on the drum all day, and then they brought out, like, taking care of business.
Well, that's Green Bay, too, isn't it?
What's that?
Yes. Bang on the drum is Packers, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being facetious.
No, I understand
they used
that,
to
but
play
just
it
for the
all the
clarity,
time, right? And then they updated the playlist. We got into Jack and Diane era, so we're with at least within the last 40 years.
Well, Jack and Diane was the song they play going into the fourth quarter.
That's what I mean, but like they're at least.
And I missed it this past year.
They've updated their playlist into the 80s at least. Chiefs fan Steve has called in. I think he's jealous of Jimmy.
They called Eddie and told him to make the playlist younger. So that's what's happened in the Colts games.
That's right. That's right. Steve, what's up?
Yes, Steve. Absolutely.
Steve's in the big rig. Steve and his wonder rescue dog Milton that has his beautiful Chiefs collar that he wears. How's Milton feeling about the game, Steve?
He's excited, ready to roll, Jake.
How does Steve feel about the game?
I'm feeling confident.
All right. And you are jealous of Jimmy, is that right? Did we lose Steve?
No, I'm here.
Okay. You're jealous of Jimmy because he's going to the game, correct?
Correct.
All right, well.
Steve, I will do my best to make it so you can live vicariously through another trip to the Super Bowl to keep this three-peat alive, my friend.
3-peat, baby. Here we go.
Now, Steve, let me ask you this as a Chiefs fan, and answer honestly, okay? There really is no peer to the Chiefs in this era, so it's not like they have a heated rival. I guess if you were going to pick one, Buffalo would be close because they've met so many times. Even though I know you would be disappointed, if Buffalo does break through and wins this game, will you root for them in the Super Bowl just because of the story and the likability of the Bills?
Maybe.
All right. That was a long pause. Steve, can we get a horn blast on the way out? Yes. Love that.
Guys.
Steve is the best. All right. See you, Steve.
If I could have that same question, it depends who they played. I can't stand Nick Sirianni. Like, I just don't like him. His persona on the sidelines are words that are not safe for radio. I don't like him. I think he's a tool bag to clean it up a bit.
I like him.
I'm not a fan of Nick Sirianni. I think he's phony. I think he's fake. In that matchup, yeah, I'd be fine with the Bills winning. If it's the Commanders, I think it's hard not to get behind the rookie QB on that stage and all that Washington, even though the Bills have gone through to finally find a quarterback and be there, then I'd probably pull with the Commanders.
The Commanders are interesting because there are a lot of times in sport where you will find a team that arrives kind of prematurely or ahead of schedule, probably a better way of saying it, and you feel like, oh, wow, like, here we go. And, man, they're going to be really good for a long time. And then water kind of finds its level again. I'll give you a good example. And it's a more veteran-laden team, and it's a different sport, so it's really apples and oranges here. But when the Phoenix Suns got to the NBA Finals, and, they were really fun to watch. I mean, Devin Booker was just hitting everything, and Ayton was a good player for them. And, yeah, they had some veterans in there as well. And you thought, well, man, the West now, or even Denver for that matter, the Nuggets.
Sure.
And you thought this was the beginning of, what was going to be multiple years like that. And then, you see, obviously, it's water kind of found its level. Between Washington, like Buffalo, it does feel, though, because they have been for a few years now what Washington was, a young quarterback where it all comes together before your very eyes, and you're like, okay, here we go. But for Buffalo, and I think a lot of with the loss of Stephon Diggs, maybe addition by subtraction, but there was certainly some discussion and thought of, does this mean that Buffalo's going to regress. You know, I think people thought Buffalo was going to take a step back this year, and they might be better than last year. But
they certainly have defensively, but Josh Allen, and Kevin said it, I've said it, Jake, you've said it as well, having the quarterback right matters, and Josh Allen has gotten better. Like, this is one of the best seasons of his career. You can make the argument that he should be the MVP. He likely won't be based on all-pro voting trends matching up with MVP votes. It'll probably be Lamar Jackson, but he himself has elevated his game to new heights where he's not turning the football over and his completion percentage is through the roof, and he's dynamic with his legs. And from a Colts-centric standpoint, yeah, that's all you're going to keep clinging to with Anthony Richardson. And maybe it does get half of Josh Allen's level at some point. But that's why I raise my eyebrows when I see Richardson working with the biometric coach that helped Allen with his accuracy. I don't know if that's going to translate to anything, but Jake, we're at a point with Anthony Richardson, along with Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, but Richardson for the purpose of this conversation, where it's put up or shut up next year. And it doesn't matter where the regressions happen for a team like Buffalo, like they are. They are a worse defense than they were a year ago by pretty much every measurable. But Allen's gotten better. For the Colts this year, yes, you want Anarumo because he's shown he can take down and mess with some of the best quarterbacks in a loaded conference, but all that matters is the quarterback. And for Richardson, I still think it's probably not going to turn out the way Colts fans want, but the fact he's putting it in and leaving no stone unturned this offseason, I can appreciate that.
you played Monopoly, right?
Yeah.
Okay. In Monopoly, Boardwalk and Park Place, the two most expensive, whatever. Patrick Mahomes would be Boardwalk, right?
Yeah.
Is Josh Allen Park Place? Who's the second best quarterback in the NFL?
I can make the case for Lamar.
I was going to say Lamar Jackson, right?
I would contend it's Burrow.
That's
Josh Allen.
Think so?
Yeah. Josh Allen still leads his team into the playoffs every year. Burrow's done it twice.
Yeah, he had a lot of injuries this year. Cincinnati did, right?
And to clarify on that front, Josh Allen is the beneficiary, and maybe you could say the same about Mahomes, even though every year they pick the Chargers to win the West. I'll save that for the offseason. That division is dog water. The East is just what it was for the Patriots all those years, where they get to play the Jets and the Dolphins and the Patriots.
Jimmy, the example you give for that, I hate to say this for people here, is the Colts. The Colts, in the Manning era of the Colts, they had a division that had an expansion.
Correct. You're right to localize it. Yes, the Jaguars, the Texans. Yes,
they had two different expansions and a relocation that was rebuilding.
But my point in defense
within their division,
defense of the Bengals, like it's apples and oranges with what is happening in that.
I understand that
division itself.
Allen does so just seem to have about him now an it factor that did not exist previously. In other words, he looks now like, do you remember, and you would know better than I, the year, was it last year or 2 years ago, where he did everything you could possibly do and still got beat in Arrowhead?
It would have been 3 years ago.
Okay.
3 years ago. The 13-second game.
He was sitting there, correct. He was sitting there staring off into space like, I can't believe this. He has a look now where when he puts his helmet on and goes out on the field, or after he scores a touchdown on a quarterback draw or whatever it might be, Josh Allen has a look about his in his eye and in his demeanor in general of, okay, everybody better get out of my way here because here's what we're going to do. He just has a command now. And I'm not saying Mahomes doesn't have that, but I mean, Allen definitely has it. Now, what Mahomes has that is incredible and almost unprecedented is an ability to see an open pass lane at a time when everybody else in the civilized world thinks that there is nowhere left to go and it's going to be a sack and the play is over. Allen, instead of making that pass, has the ability to just get up and run. And Mahomes does as well, but Allen does have the ability to throw. I mean, he had a play that I was watching. I think it was the Baltimore game, right, where he dances out, has to go backwards, and you think he's going to have to throw this away, and then he kind of sidearms it to literally the one person it can go to, and he does that. But the difference is Mahomes does that, as his left knee is a half an inch from the ground
And
as
the
he's
world
about to get sacked.
explodes.
What's
That's
that?
crazy. Mahomes does it. The whole world is going nuts.
That throw in the divisional round was the definition of that.
Difference between being a Mahomes and a Cook that we've learned. Patrick Mahomes is about to get sacked and is on one knee, still throws a completion. Jimmy's brother, one knee because the other one's got a boo-boo, stays home.
Okay.
Right?
Hey, shout out to Brother Bob. He's had bad knees his whole life.
Did he have knee surgery?
He did.
What? Did he have a repair?
Full on. Like basically full repair.
Replacement? If he just listen,
full on, yes.
I don't want to hear. If it was like an MCL surgery, I don't want to hear that. Marshall Falk had that played a week later.
If you would like, I could pass along Brother Bob's contact info if you'd like to give him a phone call after the show. We were talking about bone on bone, how bad, like no ligaments basically around anymore.
No brake pads left.
Correct.
So replacement?
This is gonna follow the Cook line if I didn't listen, but full on surgery. Full on surgery.
You not listening?
Yeah, I know. Classic me. But all the ligaments, bone on bone, had to have full on reconstructive surgery done.
Okay, no cartilage?
So that had to have been a replacement, right?
Yes.
So is he running around with metal now? Can he go through an airport metal detector without having to disclose his knee?
Would you like to roll the dice and call my brother right now? We can if you'd like.
Sure. Call your brother here. I want to find out why he's not going. Tell your brother to call in the show at 239-1070. I'd like to know why your brother's not taking this once-in-a-lifetime trip. Maybe because when this is a spoiled Chiefs fan. Well, I don't need to go. They go every year. That's the thought process here, right? I don't need to go. They go every year.
Trust me.
Old hat.
My brother is the toughest person that I know. He's as blue collar as they come.
AFC title game for Chiefs fans like going to Taco Bell.
If he could be there
tomorrow.
If he could be there, he would be there.
Okay. Well, he can. There's a ticket there, right?
We'll see if he rings in. He's a busy man.
Fair enough. We'll come back. We will get Jimmy's plays of the day, although it may be. We'll see if this is it right here. If the truth is coming through. Now, can you, Jimmy? You'll have to verify this is your brother based on the voice, right? Because we don't want an imposter.
It's not.
It's not. All right. We'll come back and get Jimmy's plays of the day next.
Today's plays of the day, a lot to get to with Championship Sunday around the corner. But first, today's action. Purdue's favored by 4 as they welcome Michigan into Mackey. I will lay the 4 on the Boilermakers against the Wolverines. Conference Championship Sunday, I'll scoop the 6. The Commanders are 6-point dogs on the road against Philadelphia, scooping the 6 for Washington. I'll take Chiefs wide receiver Xavier Worthy as an anytime touchdown scorer Sunday night against the Buffalo Bills. And give me the Chiefs outright on the money line over the Buffalo Bills. Eddie, any plays from you?
I do have a couple plays in this game. I will be taking Xavier Worthy over his receiving yardage. I think he's the mismatch for Kansas City when you look at that Buffalo secondary. So over 49.5. And in terms of touchdown scores, give me Josh Allen to find the end zone in the Bills-Chiefs game.
I have a play.
Yeah.
My play is that your brother is using the knee as an excuse that he just doesn't want to have to basically be in the car with you for 7.5 hours.
I mean, the second half of that could be true. It's very possible. It's a lot of time with cooks in one car.
He actually joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. Now, this is your brother, Bob, correct?
That is correct.
Bob
Bobby,
Cook.
what's going on?
Hey, what's happening?
Now, Bob, Jimmy showing his loyalty as the younger brother here was not aware when I asked the question. Did you have reconstructive knee surgery or knee replacement surgery?
Replacement.
Okay, now see, Jimmy sold you short, man. Because
don't throw me under the bus.
You said, yeah, he just had surgery on his knee to he had like an MCL. And
Before we went to break, I said it was bone on bone, ligaments basically gone. I just didn't know because I don't listen well.
But a repair
as
is
Bob
totally
would know.
different. Bob, this took place when?
September.
What the hell?
Yeah.
September? You should be able to run the Mini with me.
Yeah, well, I had some mishaps here. I should have stayed out of Meijer grocery store. Some old man hit me in the side of my leg. I was pushing a cart through there and hurt my ligament. So the only one I have left in that whole damn knee. And so now,
okay. Now let me ask this. So my understanding is this, Bob. Kidding aside and flippancy aside, when you have a knee replacement, my dad has had that. It does require a pretty strict and routine. And when I say routine, I mean you got to stick by it. Rehabilitation process, correct?
Oh yeah.
And that takes place for how long?
Well, my knee was. The guy told me it was the worst he'd ever done. I was bone on bone for 43 years, so he said it was going to go bad, and he was right.
Okay, and then how does it feel now?
It's about 20%. I mean, it's just turned the corner here in the last 10 days. I'm off the crutches. I'm pretty much off the cane unless there's ice out there. But, I'm walking slowly. But before that ligament healed, I couldn't even bend my knee. I had to keep it straight. I just couldn't do it.
So you've turned the corner, but unfortunately, you turned the corner with less pace than the guy with the rogue cart at the grocery store, is what we're getting at, right?
Absolutely.
And so now you will be doing what for the game because your entire family's going to Kansas City, right?
Yeah, all my roadies are hitting the road, so that'll be interesting to see how that foot travels without the big toe.
I told Bob, without Brother Bob in tow, there's a chance this is a rudderless operation, but we're going to do our best. So
okay, fair enough. So do you have to make like some sort of special meal for yourself, Bob?
Oh yeah. I haven't decided what that's going to be, but small crowd, hey, we might break out the lobster tails.
I mean, wouldn't it be? I would assume what you should make is some bison burgers. You know why?
Well, yeah, it's the Bills.
That's right. You got to feast off Buffalo, right?
There you go. Well, I didn't think of that.
Well, Bob, we're going to make you a recurring guest on the program. I appreciate you calling in and Bob, certainly ice the knee, all right?
Director of construction. I'm saying that now if I can appoint that to my my higher up there in the namesake, Jake.
Reconstruction.
Well done.
Look at that from Eddie Garrison.
Well
That's why he makes the big bucks. All right, Bob, enjoy the weekend, all right?
All right, you too.
All right.
Thanks, Bobby.
Here we go. Now, you call him Bobby like he's your younger brother.
Well, it's very nickname-oriented in the Cook household.
How many siblings?
So they call you names that I can't say on air, right?
No,
nickname-oriented.
No, Jimmy, Jay Cook, like nothing.
Sure.
You are what number?
7.
I mean, you're the youngest of
7, but from my, both my parents have passed, but 7 from my dad's second marriage after his first wife passed away.
So Eddie, you are one of 2, right?
3.
3?
Oldest of 3.
Okay. J&V just arrived, and I don't know that I know this.
Baby.
Are you an only child?
Only child.
Okay. What's
Hey,
lined
Jake,
up on the
man,
big program?
I played 10 games to the Hyper just now, buddy.
Did you really?
I did.
Well, it couldn't have been just now. It had to have been at least.
I feel like I'm Swebo in the morning. I didn't wash, and I came right on in.
I was gonna say that's an hour drive. What kind of competition was it? The
35 minutes from where I live, so
That's not bad at all.
What?
It was Mike Ross is a friend of mine I went to high school with. He's a booster down there for them, and then Josh Dowling, a guy over by Center Grove who works down there. So that Dick Enberg room's pretty cool in the Hyper building itself.
Man, I haven't been to the new Hyper in, probably since it opened. To be honest with you, you know what I mean? Did you play in the old one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
the Sunfield was going, so.
The 84 Olympic trials did not take place in the Hyper, right? Weren't they in the auxiliary next to Assembly Hall?
I think so.
The old
field
auditorium.
house?
Yeah, the old field
The
house.
old field house, yeah.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, I was in the dunk tank in that before IU Purdue played basketball back in the 90s.
Part of the Bloomington radio bit there.
I wanted to thank you, B97, for that lousy attempt at some promotion right there.
By the way, I like the sweater. You liked my sweater the other day.
I
Nice
do. I
sweater.
just threw it on. I haven't washed.
Is it?
I'm Swebo.
I'm keeping my distance. No, you're not wearing a hat. Swebo wears a hat.
Yeah, I know. I've never seen Swebo without a hat in my life. Seriously.
Is he bald?
Huh?
Is he bald?
I don't know. I've never seen him without a hat. Have you guys ever seen Swebo without a hat?
Swebo?
Huh?
Does we
Call him up really quick. I didn't see if he is bald.
Oh, he's listening. You know he is.
I could give him a helper. He's probably cutting up our sound right now.
That's correct.
Cut this one up there, Swebo.
What's on the big program today, John?
Tom Crean is on today. So you had Isiah on a little bit earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Good for Mike Wells, Bob,
the coach.
Big weekend.
Nice.
Bob Lavelle.
Yes.
And,
big Metros Day tomorrow at IU Indy.
hey, you know what? The Pacers could have just stayed here. What a joke, stupid ass trip to Paris. Thanks a lot, NBA.
Like I said, it felt for me like a vacation yesterday. Probably did for you too. And it's
Here's
almost like
it felt like 2017. I swear to God, I
Pacers
brought up that
forgot
Nuggets
that
game
it
in
was more
London.
than a
That's
vacation.
exactly what it felt like to me. So
Yeah.
what a freaking mess this is.
Yeah, and Wembanyama, did what he does, right?
See, when you think about it, even if they do come back and win tomorrow, which they sure as hell better, then they're going to look like that again against Detroit when they're back on Wednesday. And, Beef Stew's probably sleeping under the porch at Cambridge Fieldhouse waiting on them to get there next Wednesday right now because they want a piece of the Pacers after last time. This is a pain in the ass, and I wish they would have took anybody else over there.
I would tend to agree with that. The layoff certainly, and then I just think the
we brought
events
that
and
up.
everything else.
We brought that up with Tony East. It's only 4 days. Like a lot of people pushed back on that.
Yeah,
thought.
layoff. I think that just the travel, and then admittedly, you're probably nonstop doing stuff over there.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
a lot going on.
You get there, you're you slim. They try to do what you can, but there's just no way around that crap, man. It sucks and it pisses me off.
They are going to have to salvage it for sure. And then, so when we come back on Monday, from our standpoint, we will know two things. Number one, if they split with the Spurs, and number two,
Spurs
the Super
are
Bowl
giggling
matchup.
and laughing in the layup line. Oh yeah, giggling and laughing. Man, I'd be pissed just out of the giggling and laughing part of that crap. Seriously, Jimmy, you snorted.
Wee. John's up next. He'll be with you and carry you home for the rest of the day. You folks have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for listening to Query & Company.